Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Left, Right, Center show. I've been told that, again, our quality is not, world class as it should be, again. So maybe just shut the screen off and listen to the sweet, sultry sound of our voices, unmarred by any blights on the screen quality. Anyways, we'll be working on some fixes for that pretty soon. We've got a whole bunch of good stuff coming up for you. But for now, how are you guys doing? How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing pretty good, man. Excited to talk. It's gonna be an interesting one. I think it's kind of cool. We're gonna get to talk about what really drove us to decide to do this in the first place, right?
True. Yeah, true.
So excited.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, same thing. I'm excited. I mean, it's we have some good topics. Otherwise, today I'm doing good. So
sweet. All right. So I don't know. I was talking to Tim earlier. He has a whole bunch of memes and news and stuff. So hopefully we'll actually get through that in a timely manner today. But I mean, there was, I don't know. Maybe I was just paying more attention. I don't know about you guys, but it feels like the last week maybe picked up a little bit in news. I don't know. That could just be me paying more attention. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I felt like maybe it felt like it seemed like last week the election fraud stuff was kind of dying off and people weren't taking it as serious, and then this week it kind of blew back up again.
True.
And that along with I think some of the coronavirus stuff, it's coronavirus is obviously getting worse every week, and I think we're now averaging over 2,000 deaths a day.
Wow.
Whereas back in July-ish, June-ish, when everything was hyper fear, right? We were at like 1,000 a day or something. So we're at the highest death rate per day that we've ever been. Not death rate per case. That's actually gone down a lot, but death rate is in number of people per day in the country, because the case rate's gone massively higher than
right.
But yeah, so I think just a combination of stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the coronavirus thing. I like to talk to a bunch of people who I don't normally talk to try to get a gauge on some of the stuff that we talk about on a weekly basis. One of them was the coronavirus, and I constantly get surprised by people around me. Like some people who I think of as, I think of reasonable people agreeing with me. So I'm surprised when people who I think are reasonable are, deviate from certain things. And I'm just like looking around me, all of the recent stuff, say whether it's the coronavirus vaccine or election fraud, there's just people that I would not expect to either agree with these issues or be against them. Like there's just I'm not articulating this very well, but there's just like people recently all over the board, just like my mind right now, but just like all over the board for where I would think they'd be like, no, actually I do think there's election fraud. Like, wait a second, you think there's election fraud? Or somebody who I think is eminently reasonable comes out as slightly anti-vax, and it's like just throwing me off kilter. And then there's this other person in my life who would be the perfect candidate for being a populist pro-Trumper who thinks election fraud is happening, expressing extreme confidence in the election results. It's just like extremely topsy-turvy. I don't know if you guys have anything like that.
I felt the same. I mean, I think what's been really effective by the president, and clearly what he's trying to do right now, is like, just say it over and over and over again until it actually sticks. And I think it's finally sticking in terms of like election result fraud. People are actually, it's starting to like, I'm seeing people that I'm surprised by actually deny the election results. And it's like, you literally have Republicans that are elected officials in states saying like, yeah, we want Trump to have won this state, but the election's accurate. It is what it is. You can't change the votes. And then you have the president literally calling elected officials to try to overturn votes, like the House Majority Leader in Pennsylvania. It's like, wow, that's bad. But people are believing it.
Right, I would agree. It's bad, but obviously probably to a lesser extent than you, because it is not as simple as he's just calling to overturn votes for no reason, right? He's calling for a particular reason. He thinks something happened, and so I mean the end result might be this. I gotta say, I mean we're gonna get to news and memes here in a second, but I have never been so conflicted about anything in my life, right? And I'm a dirty fence sitter on things like say like the abortion arguments, pro-choice or pro-life. I've never been more conflicted, or I suppose confused about a certain topic, because when you delve into all of the election lawsuits that are going on, it's literally impossible for somebody to track all of this if you're not, up to snuff on your legal, your legal codes in like 5 different states, plus the federal government.
Every single one has failed in court.
Yes, I suppose. Yeah. So yes, a lot of them have failed. I think maybe all of them, that could be accurate. I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but
it's all of them. I've been keeping up to it. Not one successful.
I mean, we should probably just give him one.
No, not even one lawsuit from Giuliani's team.
We don't want to skunk him.
Nothing. Even the Supreme Court and his own justices turned down one of the things that finally reached a place where the Supreme Court had influence, and that was in Pennsylvania. His own justices were like, no.
Yeah. Since we're kind of on this topic, let me throw up one of my news stories because
let's do it.
Let's do it.
It really fits into this. I'm guessing. Oh no. I was trying to get rid of this ad on the top. I'm guessing you guys have.
You stole one of mine. I'll just go ahead and get rid of that.
I'm guessing you guys heard about Texas filing, their lawsuit to challenge the other states' elections, which I thought was really hilarious. From again, when I think of the Republican Party and the constitutionalists, and if you think back to how things were formed, like it was very much about states' rights to run their own, things and especially their elections, and that's been in the Constitution from the beginning. And it just seemed odd to me that the Texas was going to come out and say, I have a right to sue another state based on how they did their election.
But it makes sense
from the Republican side. No, I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense at all. I'm just saying it was shocking that they took that step, because that's like, I always took Texas as one of those strong states' rights states, right? But I just saw this article anyway, where a lot of other states have now joined in.
All red states from what I saw. It was kind of funny because when I was looking up this story, I saw a map that had California highlighted in conjunction with this article. I was like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way California joined this lawsuit. So I think it might have been clickbait.
Yeah, I don't see a map on this one, but
yeah, no, it wouldn't have been on that.
What do you guys think in general of the states filing a case to the Supreme Court for other states' elections?
So let me explain what they're trying to do real quick with a little bit more accuracy. So the reason why Texas initially opened this lawsuit was because, basically it boils down to this. Texas is saying, we did our elections correctly, right? We followed all of our state laws. We did our elections without a hitch. There's no problems with our elections, and we made it that way because our elections are this important. They are suing the other states because now Texans have to live under a president that they allege may have been voted in due to the other states' irregularities.
That sounds cute on the surface until you dive 1 inch deeper and realize that every state has done their election correctly, as well as that it has always been legal precedent. This is a binding precedent because it's been upheld by the courts, that there's to be no influence legislatively on an election upcoming in the days surrounding the actual election. And so what Trump is trying to do is to invalidate legislation that occurred a year ago. The coronavirus stuff, the pandemic, the mail-in ballots, all of this stuff was legislated, voted in months before an election. There was plenty of time. And then all of a sudden, wait, we don't like this results because he lost. We all know because there's no false ballots, there's no issues. But if Trump had won this election, he would not be doing this right now. This is the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. That's why I can't take them seriously anymore.
Well, hold on. I mean, you guys were the state of voter. You guys were the party of voter suppression is going to happen. Are you telling me that you would vote for that?
Mail-in. So first and foremost, I mean, the easier it is to vote, ideally there's more Democrats typically. Mail-in ballots is one of the easiest way to vote. So actually, mail-in ballots reduces voter suppression by a ton.
Okay, but you were concerned about it.
In particular to your statement earlier, Nathan, though, one of the things kind of I commented on before is, you said that the reasoning behind this is that Texas felt like the other states had irregularities in their voting process, and now they have to deal with the consequences. But that's called states' rights, right? Like if the voting process is a state-driven. State-driven thing, and the legislation. Hold on, and the legislation on such is also state-driven, right? So
I understand that. I agree 100%. The processes that a state uses to vote is the state's thing.
So what federal law are they saying they broke?
The external harm comes from if they're alleging that state did it incorrectly and it resulted in fraud that got Joe Biden in. Texas now suffers.
Incorrectly under what? Under their opinion? Under Texas's state law?
Under contradictions. No. So in each case, they're alleging contradictions with the state's own laws. So, for example, they're saying Pennsylvania did not follow their own laws to change the election code in time.
Which was already disputed and kicked out of the Supreme Court.
Okay, but that is the
regardless of that, that's still up to the state.
No, okay, but
to resolve that, right? The state is going to. Honestly, if a state's decided that the day before the election that they, and I don't know what legal federal laws there are, but I don't think there's anything against this, so I use this as an example. But let's say they decided the day before the election that you had to wear the color purple to go to the election booth and vote. If you weren't dressed in purple, your vote didn't count. And the legislation passed that, and the day before, and that happened, and like no votes got counted because nobody knew that shit. That would still be fine. It's unfortunately because that's how it's run. It's
right.
Allowed.
But the difference would be if, let's pretend, the governor unilaterally declared that you had to do that, and then that's what the state went with. Right. So in your instance, the legislature passed it, which is legal. Texas is alleging that the legal processes in the states were not followed.
Again, so, but again,
it's going to get litigated. I don't think they're going to win, but that's the allegation.
Yeah, and I'm okay that if you had, let's say this is using Pennsylvania as an example. I think it's fine that you have citizens of Pennsylvania, bringing up cases to the Pennsylvania courts and also to the federal courts if need be. But I think having the state of Texas and their attorney general filing this is not okay, in my opinion. And I don't want to say not okay, but I don't actually care. I think you can sue anybody for anything, right? That's kind of how this country is. But I think it's an interesting thing that such a heavily states' rights state would feel they have.
I know you keep saying that.
Interfere in somebody else's states.
It's not contradictory. It's not contradictory because they're defending their right to be part of a country that has free and fair elections. So that is their right.
I love the contradictions of the right because it's like, everything's about state rights until we disagree with the state, and everything's about like, wow, we have so much frivolous lawsuits. This is why capitalism. This is why companies have to be so much more expensive. And here we are suing frivolously across the board on everything we possibly can up against this election, and every single thing is being thrown out of the court. It's literally like a banana republic. Republicans are literally a banana Republican party.
Well, the ones that support all this,
it's a joke. It's a total joke, man.
By statistics, only half of Republicans don't believe in the election. But
you know what? Half of them, that half is a powerful number. That's 20% of the country.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we got some other.
Dude, you got what? At least a strong group of individuals. It was probably like a couple dozen showing up to the Secretary of State's home in Michigan, brandishing guns. Like, look, I get it. You guys have dicks and you have Second Amendments, but like, why are you going to someone's home when they're trying to watch a Christmas movie?
Okay, all right. Election? I really hate to do whataboutism, but apparently I don't. I mean, like, were you outraged when Tucker Carlson's house got mobbed?
I had no idea that happened. Yeah, I'm outraged by knowing that happened, but I didn't know that happened.
Okay. I mean, this happens all around. It does.
It's just
I
like-
have been focusing on this. This happens quite frequently from the other side too.
But it's just so funny because elections are typically this very boring like thing. You know, obviously there's litigation at times. You know, you had the Al Gore, you had there's always something. Like, of course, you know, in 2016 you had the Mueller report. We acknowledged you won, but like we still fought with the Mueller report, which is fair game. And sure, I expect the Republicans to do this to an extent, but this is some dangerous populism. Like, you know, this is some boring office. Secretary of State is a very boring position. It's meant to be like, all right, you file taxes, you take care of like who's getting permits, you're signing off on teaching certifications, you sign off on an election. All of a sudden, trying to be home with your family, and you got like well, I would literally have a traumatic. That's traumatic. Can you imagine having like 50 people showing up to your home all with guns?
Yeah.
Like, that's really, really traumatic.
Yeah, I mean, thus far, the right has demonstrated that they're incredibly self-controlled with those weapons. I would say the left less so. But at the same time, I mean, like, look, I mean, these showing up to politicians' homes, like that was started en masse over the summer by Black Lives Matter. Like, I hate, again, the whataboutism. I keep doing it, I guess. Apparently, I don't hate it that much. But, I mean, Black Lives Matter was literally talking about going, like, we need to bring this into the suburbs. That was a huge talking point, and they started doing that.
Awesome. Marching in the suburbs was a good thing. But we didn't show up to like the natives' home.
Exactly the way that you're speaking about.
What was that?
But they were mobbing people's houses in exactly the way that
I
you're
disagree with that. I disagree with that. You know, I think one of the biggest issues is that. So first and foremost, there's correct and incorrect ways of doing this. So when it comes to like a very high level public official, like a mayor or a governor, it's a little bit different. And I would even still abstain from it. I would never do that. I wouldn't show up to Governor Lamont's home because I disagree with him. I'd go to the state office. But more than that, there are times that type of organization is a strong tactic. You know, for example, one of the most successful things that people can do when you have slumlords, like not just like, hey, you're a developer, what blah 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 capitalism, too much capitalism in my mouth to talk type scenario. But when you have a genuine slumlord, one of the best things you can do is get all of their people to show up at their house and demonstrate in a peaceful way. It works, you know. That type of stuff actually works, and those when there's no other avenue. And I'm sorry, but like you can't just file a bunch of lawsuits in court, lose them, and then be like, all right, well now it's time to go to the house. It's like, no, that you lost.
Yeah, I kind of agree. So again, like I'll repeat. I mean, I've been playing Hard Republican most of this podcast. So number one, I was about to completely agree with you when it sounded like you were going to say it's never okay to show up to someone's house like that. I actually completely agree with that. It's not okay if it's Tucker Carlson or the mayor of San Francisco or whatever it is. Like, no, just leave politicians alone. Picket their office. Picket where they work if it's a company.
Yeah.
Oh man, I lost the train of thought. But yeah, I mean, the whole election stuff, I've never been more conflicted. Like Trump has been sure since day one that the election was stolen from him, but everything he threw out for the first 5 months for the first 10 days had absolutely no traction. You know, so it's like
he was saying the election was going to be stolen before the election happened, not because he had evidence to say that it was, but because he had evidence to say he was going to lose and he was trying to save face.
Yeah, sure. I'm not really going to argue with that because it's not really worth the time. I agree and disagree as usual. All right, let's keep going with the news. Let me pull something up here. What do I have? Oh, I actually have. It's not memes. It's Twitter things. Let's see what you guys think about this. All right, so this is actually posted under gatekeeping. So somebody thought this was a bad thing, but I wanted to see what you guys thought of this. So this is Ben Shapiro retweeting some guy. So he said, "I'm a pro-choice pastor," which to most religious people seems to be contradictory. So Ben Shapiro says, "I'm the square root of a negative number," which, if you know anything about math, is not really a number.
Yeah.
So, and then this was posted in gatekeeping, where they're accusing Ben Shapiro of gatekeeping someone else's religious belief. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I think this is a great point of on topic to what we're going to be talking about later, which is why there's such a divide.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll bring this back up when we start talking about that.
It's like Ben Shapiro is basically like, oh well, you got to pick one. You can't be both. I know what this one means. I know what that one means, and my definition of that is what's important. Go fuck yourself. You're not real, right? Like,
So I suppose after a sense, Chris, what do you think about it? Because you are, of the three of us, you are actually the person who's been to church the most recent. I have actually been to your church, and your church was not the day I went, but normally it's a progressive church, which is, they have a little bit more, they're off the old timey fire and brimstone kind of stuff. So what do you think about that?
Relatively, I actually haven't been going anymore because I feel like there has been some things have come out of the woodwork a bit, but they, relatively speaking, on the spectrum of like hyper conservative fire and brimstone to Unitarian, they're like a middle 2 steps towards Unitarian out of like 300 steps. So it's a very moderate church that I think does its best to stay out of politics in general. But I know the pastor's Republican. I know that he would be vehemently against that statement of this individual. I think what it comes down to is this can be a very long lecture, so I'm going to boil it down into several very quick points. Religion is a very personal experience. Christianity is a very personal experience. The reality is that you do not need to go to church to be a Christian. You do not need to be this loud and proud Christian to be a Christian. More than that, when you're reading the Bible, the reality is the Bible contradicts itself all over the place. So what it comes down to is that, it's not that you choose what to believe. There's there are frameworks, but there are opportunities to interpret things in ways that are beneficial. Not to be biased on what you want to, you're not reading to read what you want to read. But the reality is like, for instance, Nate, we're all going to hell because we have tattoos, right? Like, if you just ate fruit that was off of a factory farm that hasn't existed for 3 years, well, according to the book of Leviticus, you're going to hell because it hasn't been producing ripe fruit for 3 more years. So there's a lot of things that are very contradictory, and I believe that Christianity is a personal experience. And so if this pastor believes that, he has every right to believe it, and he has every right to run a congregation the way he sees fit to run a congregation.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, this kind of gets into a general topic, but I think both progressives and conservatives just lose sight of what that means and what history is. I mean, for almost all, not all, but almost all conservatives today would probably have been considered progressive, 30 years ago. And, like the Pope recently coming out and not straight defending gay marriage, but at least saying, gay civil union is okay. And, gays are people and they deserve to be treated as such and that kind of stuff, right? Not saying that, within the church they should be able to be married, but at least, outside of the religious context, is a step that, you wouldn't have expected 20 years ago.
Right.
And
it would have been heresy beyond, I don't know, even 20 or 30 years ago. It would have been much more of a big deal than it is now.
Yeah. And so, to get back to the meme-ish type thing or whatever you put up, like the fact that a pastor is pro-choice may seem pretty progressive right now, but who knows? 15 years from now, 20 years from now, that may be normal, everyday, thing. Like, but it's we judge people so hard for something that, and we don't stop and think enough and say, hey, like, what would people be judging my beliefs on in the past? Like, being that guy's not hyper progressive in my opinion, right? Like, he's
right.
Did you know for a long time, even today still, for most, I would say, the Catholic Church 100% and most evangelical churches at that, it's actually not allowed for a woman to be a pastor still. Yep. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. And that's like one of those things, and I have been to churches with a woman pastor.
Yeah, me too.
And it's really cool. And it's one of those things that shouldn't even be something that's in play, but that's a reality of, where Christianity, I would believe, is at the church level, at the congregation level, is at a progressive change in events. I think that in 20 some odd years, it'll be very common to see more women pastors. I don't think that's going to be like, wow, there's a woman pastor at this church. That's like really unique. I think it'll be like, okay, cool. That's right. Like, because women have the right to go to seminary, and women have the right to go to masters of divinity and PhDs in divinity and go become theologians. That shouldn't be a gendered issue. That's absolutely insane. And you know what? I want to go on a tangent here just because I think, it's just insane in the Christian thing. Even if we want to let's just entertain this idea of like, men should be doing masculine jobs, and there's certain jobs that are good for men and certain ones that are home.
Man, you are getting into a whole podcast series, not even a whole.
But let me just make this point. What is possibly the gendering dynamic of studying theology? Like what makes theology more manly or more not manly or womanly? And like, it is literally one of like probably the most just ambivalently gendered ideas I can possibly imagine studying. Yet here we have a patriarchal society in the Christian church. So it's just absolutely mental. And so I think the church is full of hypocrisies. I don't really go to church very much anymore. My fiance knows of a really cool one that we're going to check out. But I believe I read the Bible pretty often. Mm-hmm. I do study. I do try to I do my praying and all that good stuff because I do try to be very close to my faith, but it's a very personal thing. It's not something I'm very outward with, but I have no shame in talking about it either, as you can see right now. Like I have no problem talking about it, but I'm not going to be, it's also not my fight to fight as of today. I'm not going to go and dismantle the Christian patriarchy. Yeah. As of today.
Let me ask the both of you, because you both made the statement that it's okay for people to do whatever they want, which is a very liberal statement, which is to be expected, expected and accepted. It's a very American thing to say.
I didn't make that statement.
You generally said that. He said, well, Chris said that for sure. You were probably halfway between what I'm saying and what he was saying. But let me just, and this was just the one thing, so we don't have to dwell on this too long. How far away can a religion stretch from what it originally was? And how fast can it shift and still be considered the same language, right? For example, Christianity did go through a Reformation, but what they were doing was referencing their own text to say, here, Catholics, you're doing it wrong. This is like all of this stuff is nowhere in the Bible. And so they used their own foundational text to make a shift, and that was a radical shift. Mm-hmm. The problem is that a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, these deviations from Christianity in favor of progressivism, they don't have any standing in the text. And like you said, Chris, there are contradictions, but at the same time, the fact that a soul is imparted at conception is not really controversial.
I would disagree. There's been many times that Christianity has evolved as a church. When you go through historically, for example, there was a period in time where there was it was very, very common to be polytheistic, and then Christianity really began to build up traction because it was monotheistic. And so there was a time that there were stories that were pretty confident in the Old Testament that were existing in other polytheistic religions that were then rebranded Christian. And then in the history of theology becomes monotheistic. That's why when you read the Old Testament, it actually, sometimes it appears that there's multiple gods. It's just, we branded it as one God, but the stories come from different theologies. That's the reality. Like, when you really dive into it, there's no accident that the stories of like Sodom and Gomorrah, or the city that turns to salt, or that Adam and Eve, these world creation stories, these are very common in other religions that existed way before Christianity. What really defines Christianity is the New Testament.
Real quick, I think you're mixing up two things, which is one, on the one hand, and I will agree with this, but Christians probably won't. That Christianity is built upon older stories. For example, Noah's Ark might have actually been a story about migratory people in Mesopotamia leaving the shoreline because after the last ice age, it began flooding, and it was like moving 30 meters a day. So that was then imparted into Abraham, who was the father of Judaism.
I think my fault is I think I'm about to I need to condense what I wanted to say because I was about to go on a whole lecture and I don't have the time for a whole lecture. But really what I just want to say is there have been multiple times throughout thousands of years, both recent and further in the past, that Christianity has really reformed with the times. So we can go on forever about this. So this is no different than any other point in Christianity to me. And it is grounded in the text, but it is leaning more on really calling out hey, the text contradicts itself, which is a new radical statement. That's not something you would have heard publicly 100 years ago. You would have heard it by theologians, but not publicly. And so this is a new sense of like, how do we interpret Christianity when it's like you have the New Testament directly contradicting the Old Testament.
Yep. Well, it is considered the new covenant. Like, I mean, look, there's a whole bunch of nuance, and none of us as religious scholars.
Yeah, we're not.
Maybe we'd best leave off this. I mean, I love talking about religion and ancient philosophy and all that kind of stuff, but I'm woefully underprepared for such a podcast like this. So I recommend we move on to the next story. So what do you got, Chris?
Sorry, I'm not pulling this up right now, but I do just want to talk more in detail. I think we already hit it, but I have the headline just in regard to that Secretary of State being having a bunch of people show up with guns to her house. You know, the Washington Post was the one I think that really broke out. Yeah, it definitely pulls your heartstrings. She's like about to watch The Grinch Stole Christmas with her kids, you know, ready to rock the Christmas game. And I actually believe that was probably what's happening. I don't think that's just like narrative, you know, trying to get to your heart. I think she probably was like told the interviewer in hysteria, like, I was just trying to watch The Grinch Stole Christmas, looks out the window. Can you imagine looking out your window, whether it's your apartment or home, seeing like 50 to 100 people? And I get it. Maybe they're controlled with their guns, but that's really an intimidating factor. That, I'm sorry, but like, that's not, hey, I have a gun because I want to go hunt a deer, or I want to go to a shooting range, or I want to like be a gun collector, or I want to, you know, whatever other reason you have a gun. It was like specifically used for political intimidation, and that's scary. That's scary. That's like that's something that, you know, I get it. Our country protects because of freedom of assembly and Second Amendment's tying together, but it's wrong. It's just wrong, and it should be socially reprimanded, and it won't be. And it just really bothers me that we don't see Republicans calling it out.
Well, this one I'll call it out. I call it out wherever I see it. So don't show up to people's houses. Do not ever do that, and I will never take part in that.
Yeah, it's lame. On both sides. This is obviously the most recent event.
Right. I'm trying to hold my peace. Like, I mean, the story's about the mayor's house. I will just, I guess I'll throw it in there. I mean, when Black Lives Matter was doing it, I was calling it out then. It needs to never happen. Do not go to people's houses. You protest them where they work.
Yeah, that's fair game. But it's just like, you know, keep their kids, their families out of it. It's just not right.
Yeah. Don't do it. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm done. Tim?
I got a lighter note one.
Do it. I need it. What is it?
Any zombie movie that doesn't have hordes of people running towards the zombies to deliberately get bitten because they're convinced it's a liberal hoax is now going to look pretty unrealistic. Chris. I'm reading it. I put this one up there just for you. I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
Look,
I am internally laughing, but I promise you.
You're doing the lol, right? Where you text back lol and your face is just like,
yeah,
lol. Yeah, it's real, man. It's a good meme.
Yeah, I just that one I thought it was a quickie. You don't have to get into the details. It's just a fun little jiggle.
Listen, I think the answer is going to be a default yes from probably both of you, but do you think anti-vax is completely synonymous with the right? Like, I'll agree that it's probably more people on the right being anti-vax, but I don't think it's 100% synonymous. Like, I think you can be a Karen on both sides of the aisle.
I don't think it's 100%, but I would go with maybe like 90-10 or something, like a very high percentage break.
Chris?
Yeah, probably.
I think it's definitely more of a right thing, but I think we'd be surprised to see how much it exists on the left potentially.
But you say anti-vax. Like, if you were to say, you know, somebody that's not sold, if you were to say someone that's not quite sold on COVID vaccines yet, then that's different. But somebody that's anti-vax, like complete no vaccines, or, you know, give you Down syndrome or something, right? Like whatever they say that they do, like. Then I would say that's very heavily on the right.
I'll be straight honest. I don't know how much I trust the coronavirus vaccine, but hey, if it gives me, let me finish.
I always wanted to have an anti-vaxxer on. We can just use you.
Nate, if someone shows up right now with the coronavirus vaccine, I'm taking it. And if I get a third arm, or I can start flying, or I get super strength, cool. Like,
yes. And we'll get to fight China.
Apparently you might get a allergic reaction. So one of the things that's important about the vaccines to keep them, like, I talk to some of my friends that are pretty strongly like worried about it. They're like, hey, you're going to give everybody coronavirus. Like, look at which one is it? The polio vaccine.
Yeah.
And everyone points to the polio vaccine, and I have to like repeatedly explain to people, like, vaccines, one, are made differently today than they were then, and two, even if they were using the same types of processes, they're doing it in a different way also, in that none of the coronavirus vaccines that I know of actually use the coronavirus in them at all. So the polio vaccines used the dead polio virus in them, and so if the virus wasn't fully dead, or something like that happened, then people were getting polio, and they messed up on the first batch of those viruses, and like gave a whole bunch of people polio or whatever.
Can cure them with the second batch, or is it too late at that point?
No, vaccines are preventative, not curative. And so everyone's saying that about these, but that's not how these work. That's not how these vaccines work. They are not. These vaccines do not inject you with the coronavirus. At least the ones that I know of. None of the big name ones do. Yeah, they may have microchips in them. That's fine. They may be tracking your every location. They want to know if you're in your living room or in your bedroom. Yeah, right.
I just downloaded the Geico app. I saved $10 on my insurance by letting them track me drive. It's great.
Do we have a new sponsor?
I would have to pay more money. I'm not.
I love it. I get like a high score.
You can pay 5% or more in 5 minutes, Tim.
Every time I drive, I get like a high score. It's like, you got a 92 out of 100 on driving today. I'm like, hell yeah.
After a week, they'd be like, bro, you need to go back to your old insurance.
We don't want you.
In all seriousness, maybe the coronavirus vaccine will do something. I don't know if you ever watched Heroes, like, where 5% of the population develops superpowers. I'm here for it. I'll risk it.
Yeah, give me that superpower. I don't know which one I want though.
Speaking of which,
if it was ever going to happen, it'd be from the coronavirus vaccine. If like 5% of the population that gets a superpower. Yeah.
Well, with a name like Operation Warp Speed, it's like straight out of a comic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. It's right out of a Marvel book. That's crazy. And it's kind of funny because there's a massive premise for it. And I didn't bring this story up because it didn't quite make my cut this week. But China is looking into genetically modifying super soldiers. Like, this is real life. Like, they're trying to create faster, stronger, taller, actual super soldiers right now. Like, this is real life. They're doing that. Totally. And so, it's funny because, like, hey, maybe they put something in the coronavirus vaccine to boost our competitiveness.
It was bound to happen. It was bound that somebody was going to make this. I'm sure we're making them. We just don't know. We don't talk about it.
If genetic modifications weren't so taboo from a social aspect, we'd probably be close to being able to end natural aging at this point.
Oh, they actually are. So there's
I know they've isolated. Yeah, they've isolated that gene. They've isolated the parts of the cells that age. They've done all of this, and they have.
But there's something new. I'm trying to tell you something new that they did. This was in the past couple weeks. There's oxygen therapies that have been clinically proven to increase your telomere length, which is part of the aging process. Because your telomeres on your cells get shorter and shorter. That's how you get older and older. Your cells basically die quicker as you get older. So if you increase the telomere length on the cells across your body, your cells will die less quickly. Plus, there's another added benefit. There's something about zombie cells in your body, and it reduced that. That I know nothing about, but apparently it did both of those things, which is technically reducing your age.
Yeah, in the case of telomeres, size does matter. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Telomere lives matter.
You got another one, Nate?
I think I do. Yeah, I got another one from the Sauce Queen herself. Let's go. You know what I'm talking about. All right. AOC. In this one, I actually didn't get it for its sauciness, I suppose. I kind of actually just wanted to talk about what she's bringing up here. So this is a tweet from the illustrious AOC. She says, issues that millennials in Congress could handle better than multi-decade incumbents. Automation, digital privacy, cyberware or election security, deepfakes, and revenge porn. And I'm not sure why she included revenge porn. She's probably just like trying to come up with the fifth. And then she, it's like, okay, that kind of works. Anyways, it's a huge problem that our leadership isn't digitally competent. How can they prep us for the future? And discuss. What do you guys think?
I think she could have replaced revenge porn with like hacking people's phones and stealing their nudes or something like
Right, or AI or
like anything. Yeah, that's a
something.
I read that one. I'm like, whoa, we just went.
Yeah,
on.
like
to be
driving
honest,
cars. Anyways,
I would say that is definitely something that needs to be legislated. I think it's one of those it's one of those like really weird things to talk about publicly, but it's something that our current Congress just isn't talking about, and it's something that like actually that's definitely violating privacy. It's definitely violating a host of things constitutionally, and it should be addressed. And the reality is our current senators are a little too old, and they're probably just like, we're gonna not talk about this. This is uncomfy.
Don't think that could be like a state thing? Like, I feel like that just squarely falls into
federal. That's definitely federal issue.
I don't disagree with her the premise of what she's trying to say at all, which is our legislators, our Congress, our elected officials generally are too old and too technically incompetent to handle a lot of these types of things that are coming about in our society. Our society is changing very quickly.
Very quickly. Society's changing more quickly than it has ever.
Yeah, and they're just not able to keep up. And that brought to mind, and I don't have this video pulled up because I didn't obviously didn't know you were going to pull that meme up or whatever, but or that article. But within the last week or two, I was watching a documentary on kind of the internet and how it's affecting things, and they showed a clip from the 1990s, I think, the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, of a senator talking about porn on the internet, and he has this manila folder of screenshots that I guess they had taken, and he's like, I have all these disgusting things that you can find on the internet in here, and my 5-year-old can just go on and look at them, and and they were talking about it in a way that is absolutely hilarious to us today, and we still haven't seen much in the way of changes. Like, they've been talking about this for how long, but nobody knows how to handle it. Nobody how to approach it. And what they think is disgusting is like back then, 20 years ago, is common day now, right? Like the types of stuff you see. Like, they were showing pictures of girls in like bikinis and things.
Yeah.
Like it's
scantily clad women.
Yeah, exactly. So I do agree with generally what she's saying, in that we need to work on reducing the average age of our elected officials.
You know what somebody might say about that? And I just thought about this now. I mean, the technical line is that if your senator is too freaking old, you need to vote in a new one. I mean, that's kind of on you, the elector.
100%. Yeah, I don't think there should be any laws that say like you can only be this old.
Yeah. I suppose you're right. Yeah.
I just mean that like we as a population need to start realizing, and it would be nice that we kind of had something in our head, like maybe the average age of our legislators should represent the average age of the population or something, right? Like, which isn't the case. Well,
the wisdom of our elders is a real thing. You do kind of get smarter as you get older. So, I mean, I don't know if it should be the average age, but it should certainly be, there's some people that are definitely too old. And they're, like you get the Facebook Twitter hearings, and you get some old crusty Republican, like,
Ted
talking to Jack Dorsey about Facebook, and he's like shaking, and he's like, the internet, ISPs, and they're just like going nowhere with it because they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and they're trying to read what their intern wrote them, but they can't actually see. They lost their vision 30 years ago.
Yeah, we gotta. Not a bad point to that. It is up to each state to vote out their old people.
Right, and she's not suggesting
it's not about the wisdom of the elder. Bye, Chris. It's not about the wisdom.
I am here. Just give me 1 second.
It's not about the wisdom of the elders, though. Like, it's about having someone in power that can understand what's going on. I mean, if we're saying that they're not competent, that they can't keep up with the technology and how society is today, then is that really the wisdom of the elders that we're looking for?
Well, right? let me just draw, now I'm belaboring the point a little bit. Let me draw a distinction between knowing about technology and being wise, right? So being wise means that you can universally make good decisions if provided with the right information that you can understand. And generally older-ish, like within reason, I'm sure there's a bell curve, but the older you are, generally speaking, the more wise you are because you've lived longer. That just seems to bear out through history. And the distinction would be like, I mean, we're not going to put millennials in Congress or in a special subcommittee to deal with like Twitter or issues like that, because millennials still aren't wise per se, right? So we're hopefully voting in wise people, not necessarily knowledgeable people.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like we should still have the wise, the elderly on there. We should also have some of the millennials. We should have, and I think that the distribution of ages should somewhat match the distribution of ages of the population. I mean, they're your representatives. They're representing you. Some 80-year-old guy does not represent me, right? This is kind of the point I'm making. Shouldn't our representatives somewhat mimic,
I guess, in a perfect world,
our population is?
Yeah, I would generally agree.
Chris, you got another one?
Just another verbal one, but I think it's kind of interesting to bring up. I don't know if you guys have read this story about the individual who formerly worked for the public health department in Florida, who then was just there's no proof that leaked information, right? But what did happen is she was running a COVID test because she believes the government was not fully providing disclosure on the actual figures of deaths in Florida, which maybe is possible. And there's a decent following for her. It seemed pretty legitimate. It doesn't seem like she's like at the fringe. Like she's running a website. She's every right to do that. Alex Jones has every right to run his website. And then her house got raided by the government, and like guns were held to her kids. And it's just like, I get it. I know what the devil's advocate is like. Well, they needed to find the computer that maybe sent the email that leaked this information. But it's like that. What type of country are we living in? We should not be doing that to anyone. That's some deep police state stuff.
Okay, so I did hear about this. So she's not getting arrested for her COVID board. She's getting arrested for hacking her old work site, and she sent in a message that said, "Be brave, stand up to the government" type stuff. So that's
should it? Isn't the whole point of like why you guys want guns is to stand up to the government?
Okay,
like
but
she's standing up to the government.
She's not part of a popular rebellion yet. I mean, like, she hacked the government website. That's against the law. I don't know what you want me to say.
She didn't hack anything. That if you read the article.
So Chris, the idea with civil disobedience is like you do a sit-in or you do something. You do Rosa Parks. You sit in the front of the bus. You're expecting to get arrested. Like you're making a statement. Like the people who do these things don't expect not to get arrested. Right? Right. So I mean, you could almost argue that might have been part of her point, but I don't think it was.
Well, getting arrested has gotten her story out to a much wider audience than it would have otherwise anyway.
Probably. I knew about her back when she got fired.
I never looked at her website really. Like I didn't know anything about it. But I did catch wind of her getting arrested, and I read through the articles that I saw on it. I read through like 2 or 3 from different sides, and generally, what it looks like is I think she got in trouble because she was pulling data. She didn't hack anything. She just it was accessible, and she knew how to access it because that's how she accessed it when she worked there. So she just like was doing the same thing. It just wasn't secure or something along those lines. Like she even makes a comment. She's like, I don't know how to hack anything. She's like, I'm just a freaking doctor. Like, but the point being, like, I don't think she actually hacked anything, and I don't think that's what the accusation was. But I think what triggered it all was somebody did like hack something and send this email, and they weren't sure if it was her or not. So they had to like confiscate the computer and do all that. But it is related to hacking in this email. But I think where she might get in trouble is that she was actually accessing data that she shouldn't have been allowed to access, but just knew how to do it because she used to do it from her job.
Right.
But we'll see what comes from it.
I think. Well, and it's just sketchy because she has been a vehement critic on the governor, and then it just so happened. I mean that the justice that served the warrant is government appointed by this current governor. The sheriff is also, relatively close with this governor. It's just like, I'm not trying, I'm not a big conspiracy theory.
You're alleging some baseless election fraud there, Chris.
You know it. Well, the difference is that people aren't bringing guns to Trump's kids. And so in this case, the government brought guns to a person's house. And it's just like,
I hope that this stays public. because that's going to be her best chance to not, if this is some sort of conspiracy thing, it's going to be her best chance to get past it, right? So I hope it stays public. I hope people are are on her side trying to get to the truth. And if she did something illegal, or and that results in her getting arrested, then it does. I think to say that all these people were appointed by the governor, that's generally how these positions are. It's not like these are magical positions that aren't generally appointed by the governor. So who else would go in and arrest her? And then second to that, if she is a widely known, outspoken person, which you guys had heard about her before this arrest, you would think the governor would be a little bit more worried about arresting her if there wasn't some sort of evidence, right?
Yeah, I don't think it was the governor. I don't think the governor had anything to do with this.
I'm trying to play both sides here, and she says like DeSantis was in on all this stuff, so I think that's the governor down there, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, she got fired for insubordination, so I mean,
she got.
Yeah, we're calling out.
In her words, she got fired for not altering the data or something, right?
Correct. She says.
But anyway, I hope it stays public. I hope we get more information, and I hope we know the facts. And my gut says that she probably wasn't doing much wrong, but probably did cross a line somewhere, and then they used that as a way to kind of take down something they didn't like. Unfortunately,
yeah.
So
I gotta say, look, as somebody who's mildly familiar with entering a place with weapons drawn, I don't think even an alleged hacker, like, they knew where they were going. So I don't think even an alleged hacker, I mean, some of them warrant weapons out, but I don't think she warrants weapons out.
I agree with that.
Like, it's not an egregious violation by the police by any means, but I just, as a decision, I don't think it was the right decision to go in with weapons out. And you'll even see the lead cop who, if you see the video, the lead cop who walked into the house didn't initially have it drawn, and then he sort of drew it as a precaution coming in. There were some other, G.I. Joes behind him who already had them out and were sort of like, doing the thing where they creep up on the stairwell and they're like clearing their corners and stuff. I don't know. Maybe they're new.
Maybe they knew there was a video being taken.
Yeah, well, probably not. Okay.
Most of mine are quick, so we can
sure
hit up one or two more.
I don't think I have anything else that was super dire anyway. So
this one's on the anti-vaxxing. I thought this was a funny one because I love this actor and I love this scene. I can just hear it in my head. I'm something of a scientist myself.
Oh my God, yeah. I love that meme. That's like the perfect use for that meme.
Yeah. So anti-vaxxers, come on. You got any other fast ones? I got 4.
No, I don't. I'll just talk about anti-vax real quick. So, in 15 years when we get famous after we're all dead and it doesn't matter anyways, and they come back, and when any anti-vaxxers come back and watch this, let me just explain real quick why most people are very, very skeptical of anti-vax, even though they don't understand, if they don't exactly know how to articulate. So here's the issue. With anti-vax, you absolutely have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. And I say that as respectfully as I can. Like, you don't. It does not matter what you read on Google. It does not matter what you read on Google. You don't know what you're talking about, right? A lot of times you'll be told that there are poisonous elements inside vaccines, or that the elements, that there will be a correlation here, that, like, you'll see, oh, look at all the autism is rising, and then this is the amount of vaccines that the country's been given. Oh, look, the correlation, right? So the most important thing that you need to know, correlation is not causation. If you don't know how to read statistics and be critical of statistics, you are going to be taken in by every Tom, Dick, and Harry who has a YouTube channel. You need to be very careful with this stuff. Just because something could be true doesn't mean it is true. So that's my rant on that. Like, you really, really have to be careful. Like, scientists, you have no idea how chemicals affect your body, and you have no idea how much of those chemicals are acceptable in your body. So even if there is literally mercury in something, it probably doesn't matter, depending on, the dosage that you take. So just be careful with that stuff. People are not on your side very often, and we're going to get into polarization and information silo in a couple minutes. So perhaps this whole episode might be of benefit to you, particularly.
I can throw up this one. I thought was a fun one. I've known people that wear a mask religiously and have still gotten the virus. And the guy's response was, I've known people who obey speed limits and traffic lights and still get into car accidents. People who don't smoke that get lung cancer. How many helmeted kids got hurt on their bike? The fact that no safety precaution is 100% is not 100% effective is not an excuse to act irresponsibly. That was a pretty good response to that.
Yep, it's decent. I think they're both still a little off the point. Guy number one was more stupid. Guy number two was okay. He was okay.
This one I think is kind of funny, showing the hypocrisy. It says, weird that the COVID virus is just like the flu, but every right-wing political figure that tests positive is immediately flown to the top medical center in the country, treated by top medical personnel and administered treatments the public doesn't have access to.
That sounds like a populist left statement.
It definitely is. It's not a fair statement, but it does.
Right, I would say
show some of the hypocrisy, right?
I haven't seen any evidence that they have access to. I mean, obviously they have access to better doctors, so I'm not going to dispute that at all. But Trump
was given stuff that's not available to the public, and at least en masse, for sure he was.
Well, I forget the name. That's the guy that put in right to try, so we can all try whatever the heck we want now.
Let's see. This one I thought was just funny. I was trying to not get too many anti-Trump ones because I kind of harp on those a lot. So apparently this lady found this book in their house. It's from 2006. And, top 100 bullshit jobs, and one of them says being Donald Trump. And not to go through it, it's got a lot of words in there, but basically it's like, he's a scam artist and full of shit. And,
that's funny.
Whatever. So, let's see. Have you guys seen this one? I'm sure you have. It's been around a lot.
Yep.
This one I thought was pretty hit pretty close to home. We've had some really, really heavy, deadly days, and our infection rate is still not that high.
Yeah, look. And again, so you can always dissect a meme because they are always extremely reductive. But it's just, first of all, it's inaccurate because the Galveston hurricane killing 8,000 people. Okay, another 2,000 people also died in the country during that day or something. Whatever it is. Lots of people die all the time. The reason why those things are particularly, emotionally resonant is because it was the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor. It was an act of, covert, sudden aggression. It was a surprise. You know what I'm saying? All of those things are not the same. It's not even close. Not even a little bit. And
if you, I actually think that they are, in a way, because, I get Pearl Harbor was an act of war, and several of them on there, I just closed it, so I can't pull back up, but the hurricane is not. That's a natural disaster, right? And I would kind of say that the coronavirus is kind of a natural disaster in a way as well, right? It's something that happened in nature that happened. But you kind of have to, if you kind of generally assume that on any given day you have the same average number of deaths, the only thing that then spikes that up or down are big events like these. So I do agree with you that it may be that any one of those days may have had a couple more thousand people die than the other or whatever. I don't know what the total number of deaths are every day in this country. But generally, I think that makes a really good point in trying to show that, we are having massive amounts of excess deaths a day right now compared to some of the biggest heartbreaking events. Yeah, I know. I've seen that. But if you look, that goes into middle of November. And as we've talked before,
in the middle, it's not incredibly accurate yet. But
it's not accurate yet, yeah.
Listen, so I've been thinking about this. I didn't do this for this show, and I might as well just do it now verbally. I was going to draw this graph if what it would look like if the Black Plague rolled around, or if a serious actual plague came around. This stretches the capacity of our hospitals because our hospitals are not meant to be able to flex that much, right? There's going to be percent tolerance. But as far as historical pandemics and deadly plagues, it's not good that people are dying. But to say that any of these days are equivalent to Antietam, which was just a disastrous battle with so many thousands dead, or Pearl Harbor, or any sudden natural disaster, it's just not accurate. It doesn't have the same emotional resonance.
to you,
The
why
emotional
not?
significance
The
matters.
same number of people are dying.
The emotional
same
significance matters. An act of sudden aggression by the Japanese Imperial, Navy is a lot different than another day of people dying. Like, look at this. This is a couple percent of deviation of what it normally is. Despite
And
the
if
fact
that-
that people
but if
are
that
dying from this,
percent-
it is not a significant deviation for the normal American. It is not. If this
Okay,
that would be
take that
deviation.
aside. Take that aside, though. Like, let's say that couple percent deviation is 2,000 people.
Yep.
And let's say that Mexico decided to try and invade Texas and killed 1,000 people. Why is that 1,000 people?
We wouldn't give a shit. We wouldn't care how many. We would care that they invaded us. That's the emotional resonance.
I think
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, but I'm saying that the deaths are what matter. Chris, go ahead.
No, just totally. That's absolutely matter. Even if it's only a couple percentage points each month or instance. I mean, when you look at the whole year, it's like, all right, there's clearly been more deaths this year than there are supposed to.
Let me go back.
And that's significant.
I mean, hold on.
The whole year. Look at from about right here to here. Look how many people would have died anyways. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not saying it's a good thing or that it's okay or that it's it doesn't matter that these people are dying. But look at the volume of people that died over the year, and then look at the excess volume. There is excess volume. We have another 5 flus on top of these.
I do not understand your point of view at all, and I just looked this up to double check it. Like we had 2,800 people die from coronavirus, whatever that chart said, like on Wednesday or something, right?
Yep.
That's more people than died in Pearl Harbor. But Pearl Harbor matters, even though the percentage different is the same or even less.
But okay,
Because
do
it's what?
either
Because
of you
it's not
actually not
long-term?
see the difference between those two things. Like you genuinely don't.
I 100% see that there's a difference, but I also don't feel like it's any less tragic.
Yeah.
In any case, like in any case, did those people have to die? Is it tragic that those people died? Yeah, 100%.
I do see the difference, but I do have to also agree with Tim that it's we can't just underscore the amount of deaths. The reality is that other countries have this kind of taken care of right now and other countries have a lot worse. The reality is, yes, there would have been X hundred thousands of deaths today, but plus 2,000 those were COVID that wouldn't have happened had we taken the precautions and done what we need to do. This is, at this point, COVID is not so much a public health crisis to me as it is a political crisis. If we did the political things needed to do, the policy implementations, the hardcore lockdowns, if people actually stayed locked down instead of just saying like, fuck your mask, what in tarnation, and then, maybe we'd actually have this taken care of by now.
So I wanted to talk about COVID lockdown policy, and maybe we could do that for a couple minutes while we're not getting to our main topic. But I have a very, very serious issue with the way that the lockdown policies are flowing down from especially Democrat-led states right now. And let me articulate it real quick so that I can get your guys' opinion on this. So the main goal of these lockdown restrictions are to reduce harm, right? To reduce harm from the coronavirus. And so I'm not even going to get into you shut down companies, people are losing their livelihood, and people are committing suicide or getting hooked on drugs. I'm not even going to get into that. I'm going to get into you are not even putting forward the most effective. You're not even putting forward the most effective policies, right? So basically, my case, and I'll make this quickly, and I'll try to make it succinct. My case is that all of these policies are punishing all of the people who have less than 1% chance of dying from this thing, in favor of the people who are elderly with preconditions, right? So Johns Hopkins University did a study about a month ago at this point that said age is a factor in whether you're going to die from this, but that's not the primary factor. It's not even close to the primary factor. The primary factor is preconditions. And so the result of that study is that we know exactly who is at the highest risk of dying from coronavirus, and yet we're shutting down everything, right? Including schools for kids who are statistically 0% chance of dying from this. Let me just finish up real quick and I'll let you guys talk about it. Instead of saying, if you are elderly, you need to stay home. If you have this precondition, you need to stay home. And if you're elderly and you have this precondition, you need to not see anybody ever, right? So instead of being smart and doing that, we shut down the entire state, because these are statewide, injunctions, wherever it is. You shut down the entire state, and you're putting people out of business for absolutely no reason, when everybody who's below the age of 20 who doesn't have a precondition could literally go about their life as normal and have less risk than they get from the flu.
Absolutely not. I mean, the reality is that, and I know what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I'm not trying to just shut down like your because there's value in what you're articulating. You're right. You and I are not going to die if we get COVID. Well, hopefully, right? It's possible. It's happened, but hopefully.
1 in 1,000.
The reality is, we interact with people who can, but we interact with people who can die from COVID. I directly interact with people all the time who have pre-existing conditions. That's the issue here. Is that yes, there's plenty of I'm sorry, but I'm actually getting a little frustrated with this. I think sometimes people get really caught up with this idea, like, oh yeah, kids aren't going to get it. They're just going to go home and see their middle-aged mom and dads. But how many people have multi-generational homes? How many people have multi-generational families that have? You can't just keep grandma locked in the closet. I'm sorry, but like most Latina families are multi-generational, and those are American citizens that are tens of millions of them in our country, right? Like, what are you supposed to do for those kids? What are you supposed to do for urban environments? It's not that grandma's going to get COVID because she didn't use hand sanitizer on the self-checkout machine. Instead, her kid took their mask off, went to a party, comes by, and then gives, "Hey, what up, grandma?" And then opens the fridge, and then grandma gets COVID and dies because grandma.
So it's also that you can't just so what do? You say, hey, if you have a pre-existing condition, you can't go to work, you get to stay home. Well, how are they going to pay their fucking bills? Right? If the government hasn't stepped in and put down the business,
how are they paying their bills anyways?
Well, I think the issue is, Nathan,
they're not shutting down businesses, but on top of that, I have been pretty safe about it. I don't really go out too much and go out in public. My kids aren't in daycare; they're staying home. One of my coworkers, there's only several people in my office, a handful of people, and those schools opened back up. And his son's in high school. His son was in school. His son got coronavirus. So my coworker got coronavirus. So I got exposed to it. I just recently got my test back yesterday or today, and it came back negative. So good for me. But I was put at risk because his kid, who's not going to die from it, went to school, right? So I guess I could choose to not work. Hey, you know what? I'm glad you can go to school, even though you can get the same shit done and go to school from home and let everybody else do work and do what they need to, so you're not being extremely unsafe of being in massive populations, right? To try and protect everybody.
And I want to hear what Chris has to say, and then I'll respond.
Well, I want to finish this out. It's an asininely selfish thing to say. I should be able to go to do what I want because I'm safe. Fuck yourself. Figure it out. Right? Why do we have speed limits? Why can't everybody drive whatever goddamn speed they want? Because it's not publicly safe. It's also not public. It might be safe for me. I can make that choice and drive as fast as I want. So what if it kills myself? I can make that choice to go out in public if I get COVID. So what? I'll get COVID. That's my choice. It is not at all.
Yes, it is, because you are more in your scenario. You're raising your risk of death regardless. In my scenario. Again, you're more
I'm only raising my
age if you are more safe at my age and my health than if I get the flu.
I can drive at 80 miles an hour safer than my 80-year-old grandma can drive at 80 miles an hour. So why don't we have different speed limits based on age?
Let me answer this discussion. I think that's worth mentioning. The first one is, Nathan, I actually do agree with what you said. Maybe in a different way, but I agree the lockdown measures aren't effective because I don't think they go far enough. I think that we should have a mandatory. This is never going to happen, but I think we should have a mandatory. I don't care if it's a Republican governor, a Democratic governor. There has been a couple Republican governors at the forefront of this. Not many, but there's a couple that took it pretty seriously. We should have a mandatory shutdown. No essential workers other than hospitals and EMT and police. Everything shut down. Give everybody a stipend for 2.5 weeks. We pay everybody their stipend during those 2 weeks of shutdown.
Where do you get food?
You prepare for it months ahead of time. We say in February. So you get from now until February to make sure you have enough food, you have everything you got to go. And look, I get it. It's not the yeehaw, free America, eagle, cacaw. mentality, but like it would solve the problem. This is what Thailand did, and Thailand is throwing rages now. Thailand's having EMD concerts. The second thing I want to say is that yes, even though you and I may not die from this, we have no idea whatsoever long-term health implications of COVID. The reality is, like, even once you've done it, my friend Alexis has had COVID. He's still, we're at a month and a half later, cannot taste food, dude. He's no longer contagious. He actually can't taste food.
Okay.
We're talking a month and a half after.
Granted,
We have no idea what's going to happen when Alexis is 60. We have no idea how this is going to impact his lungs.
So you're saying that you need the government. Both of you are saying that you need the government to save you from yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, well, it doesn't need to save me from myself. It needs to save everybody else from their
Right.
side.
No.
Right.
I need the government to save me from dumbasses that are going out to the bars, getting in big groups of people without masks, then go and sit next to me on a bus or somewhere that I have to be where I'm trying to be socially distant. It's like
Also,
I need the government to come in and say, hey, there's a law against drunk driving because it puts other people at risk. There's no fucking difference here.
Okay, so all right, so that was a poor tactic by me. I would still prosecute that in other senses, but again, my point with specificity is that if the goal is to reduce harm, these lockdowns are not targeting the correct demographic, right? You are literally shutting down society for a small segment of targeted people that can isolate on their own, that can self-isolate. Like, for example, just an example, like a targeted program would be far better if you were to say, the CDC has released a statistical analysis of your risk. So we have 3 different factors. We have 2 different factors on this chart, and you need to figure out what your risk number is based on your age and your amount of preconditions. And then you need to make the best decision for yourself, right? If you're a 98 on here because you're 80 freaking years old, you're obese, and you have, 15 other things.
Okay, great. So let me ask you something.
What about the people that can't just stay home? What about the people that are essential workers? What about? And I get it. You can be like, well, it's your choice.
Even that. What do you do? Well, okay, so let's say you do that, right? And I look at this thing and I fill it out and I'm like, hey, I'm a high risk. I want to stay home. And I call my boss. Hey, boss, I'm a high risk. I'm not coming in for a month. What the fuck happens to my job?
Okay, the alternative is that the company is shut down. So nobody's working.
That's not the alternative. The alternative is that we actually do our jobs and stop being dumbasses and socially distant, wear your mask, and do the things you're supposed to do.
I'm okay with socially distancing and wearing masks. I never once came out against that.
That's the main. I'm not talking about statewide lockdowns. I've never said that I wanted that.
That's I was talking about that.
Now, early on, I would have loved that. I think that would have been great. Lockdown for 2 weeks. And actually do it and don't go out and spread it and great. But we haven't done it. It's too late, in my opinion, at this point to try and do something like that because you'll never be effective enough. Right? But what's happening, where these things are spreading and why it's like this isn't because it's not locked down completely. It's because people are tired of it. People are going and visiting their friends and they're going into like Thanksgiving dinners, big family gatherings, right? People are doing these things. That's where they're spreading. It's not just a normal life.
You can't have.
I've gone to the grocery store, worn my mask, stayed away from people. I've gone out. I'm not like a hermit. I haven't contracted it because I've been trying to be smart about it. The people I know that are getting it are the ones that are in school, in public, in big groups, or they're going out to the bars or doing other things where they're being exposed to a lot of people in large groups.
And that was their choice, wasn't it?
That puts everybody at risk.
It affects us. Like it's you can't just have 75% of the population complying with like expectations. I get it. Like we can go about like our freedoms and liberties and all that good stuff, but we've had
Right, I'm not just crowing about liberty though.
In World War II, we had rationing, right? It's not like we haven't done these things before. This is a international crisis. World War II was an international crisis. There was legalized. There was rationing, right? Why can't we do? Let's provide a stipend because the reality is certain people can't just not go to work. So let's make sure those people are taken care of. The government can invest for 2 weeks, right? Make sure, mandate everybody stays home. You're gonna have people that are like yeehawing and be upset that they have to stay home. So you have the gun brandishing people. Criminalize it.
Okay,
honestly, for
Okay, yeah, but you're being, and we're actually gonna talk about this pretty soon. You're being very dismissive of the people, the small businesses mostly, who are losing their entire life's effort.
But they're not losing that only because of lockdowns.
Yes,
They're
they
losing-
are.
they're losing that- No, it's not. Ohio,
they
where
are.
I live, is not locked down, and small businesses are still dying. It's because I'm not going into their business.
But wouldn't
And,
you
you know,
rather
It's
have?
been
Let's let them suffer for 2 weeks versus another 6 months.
this shit's
No,
been going
no.
on for a
You were
year.
told no. I know you guys can't remember, but back in May or March or whenever these things first started happening, they were told in California that this was going to be a 15-day quarantine, and then we should be good after that, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, you can't use that line anymore.
Well, it should have worked,
Because then
but it
McDonald's
didn't because
also
people
made
didn't
essential
follow the
worker.
rules.
and they won't now, Tim. So there's
I
literally no
agree with
point.
you. I agree with you.
Okay, okay.
But because people didn't follow the rules, instead of those small businesses having to weather 15 days of not having customers or clients, they've now had to weather almost a fucking year of it. Right?
Yes.
We
So
had
are you
large
telling me that
corporations
these lockdowns that they were these
Why on
companies
earth?
were already struggling, and now you think lockdowns on top of it is a good idea?
Why on earth was McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell listed as essential employees, right? Like, that's why these lockdowns failed, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, you mean I can go into Target with 3,000 other people? Or, oh, I can go buy a McDonald's, like, Happy Meal right now in the middle of a lockdown? Like, of course the lockdowns failed, because all it ended up doing was hurt small businesses because we allowed larger businesses to still operate. I'm saying we should shut down Amazon. We should on everything.
Why?
We should not let every single thing for 2 weeks, because Nathan, ends justify the means, like delayed gratification. If we can bang out 2 weeks, we're good for months.
So if we were talking 8 months ago, 6 months, let's say 6 months ago about this, I may have been more on board with you because we were a lot further out from a vaccine, and it would have had a much greater.
By you mean Chris?
Yes, it would have had a much greater impact on how many people we could have saved because of it, and how it's going to impact the government or the economy. But I think at this point, doing that, because like you're saying, we'd have to push it out to at least February. Like, imagine the undertaking it's going to be to make sure that everybody is supplied with enough food and water. And I mean, you can't shut down everything. I mean, just imagine if somebody's water heater or furnace goes out during this. Like, I guess there's no furnace repairman, so that person's just going to freeze in the middle of February, right? Like, you can't shut down everything. There's going to have to be these essential services that work. Now, they should actually be essential, right? But and so it's a massive undertaking to do what you're saying. And I think if we could have done it, it would work and it would be great. I think at this point, it just isn't going to work. But we do need to have, in my opinion, government regulations coming out and saying, if you're out of your house, you're out in public at all, wear a mask, right? Maybe restaurants shouldn't be able to have.
Statistically, that's already happening. Statistically,
them.
Americans wear masks. I know
Yeah,
we
great.
like
So
to think that there's
60% of people do, so 40% of people don't. Right? Like, statistically, most wearing it doesn't.
I heard.
And for the people, I'm just making that number up. I don't know that that's the statistic. Sorry if I made that seem like that.
Dude,
I just meant like.
I'm sorry, but like, people aren't wearing masks. I was like right across from the building that I'm working in. Like, they had a whole like at least like 15 to 20 construction workers like inside, doing repair work and whatnot inside the building next door, all walking around outside to like go back to their cars, working. And I looked inside, like, not a single one wearing a mask. They were walking down the streets, and it's like, there's a lot of people that are totally neglecting masking.
No,
What?
so there's a liquor store by my house that I've gone to a couple times since I moved here, and nobody in that place, not even the workers there. There's signs on the door say wear your mask. So the first time I went there, I was like, fuck, I forgot my mask. And I knocked on the door, like cracked my head, and I was like, hey, you guys got an extra mask? I forgot mine. They're like, mask? Like, dude, just come on in. Like, we ain't got one. You don't need one. Like, blah blah blah. Like, they don't wear them at all, right? And none of the customers in there ever wear them.
Yep. And I think that's stupid.
It is, but that's happening, right? So that business, there should be a way to go in and say, hey, that's not safe for the public.
Look, again, Tim, that is anecdotal. That is anecdotal. By statistic, Americans wear masks.
What's the statistical number that people wear them?
I will have to bring it up. I'm sorry, I don't have it with me. But there was a nationwide study that says Americans are masking at a higher rate than half the European countries.
Great.
We're still seeing the spikes. Yes.
It doesn't mean that it's enough. And what about going to a restaurant? Like all the restaurants you go and eat in.
What's causing
Right?
the
But the
spread
point that
right
I want to
now
get
is-
to that I haven't gotten to yet because you keep saying we wear them statistically higher
But-
than others, so
but
yeah,
what's
for us
causing
that's good enough.
also
Is
might be-
you hear the argument like the government doesn't have a right to mandate such a thing, right? Which is hilarious to me because we're happy enough the government will mandate a moral right for a woman to wear a shirt and cover her nipples because it's immoral. It doesn't even endanger anybody. It's just makes you feel uncomfortable to maybe get a Woody walking around because the lady's got her shirt off, right? But that's fine if a government mandates
Tim,
that.
how's that
Or-
not your spicy take from last week?
Or if a restaurant or a store says, "Hey, no shirt, no shoes, no service," that's okay. But goddamn, if they say you have to wear a mask to come in here, man, it's a fucking crime and it's a crime against freedom. Like really, come on.
We're missing a critical thing too. That it's not that. I'm glad that Americans are wearing masks. I believe it. But the reality is that it's not spreading in supermarkets. It's not spreading when we go to Target. It's spreading in American leisure life. It's spreading with all the bro groups that are hanging out on the weekends. Like I haven't gone to my bro group that I usually hang out with in like months, and it makes me sad but the reality is every time I've ever gone there, everyone's like 12 people stacked up in a living room, no masks, and guess what? Like some of them actually got COVID. So it's like and their families got COVID. And thank God nobody died. Statistically, they probably were pretty close to having a family member be KO'd, right? Like that's the reality right now. So it's the leisure life, it's the home hangouts, it's the Thanksgivings, it's the game nights, it's where people are like, all right, I trust you, I know your circles, and so I've been wearing my mask at the store, and they take their mask off. Even today, I had students in my office. One of them was like, "Hey, do you mind taking my mask off?" And I was like, "Listen, my gut says I want to say it's fine. I know that you're probably okay." But I just can't bring myself to say yes to that. We need to keep our masks on because the reality is we just don't know.
So I just looked it up, and 72% of Americans in the poll that this particular site did, and this is in October, said they always wear masks.
Yeah, always.
So 72%, right? So 30% don't.
No, not don't.
Don't always. I
They
agree.
didn't break it down any more than that?
Yeah, they have it to where it says 93 say they sometimes, often, or always, which
Yes.
to me means, yeah, I've worn one once before, right? That's
No.
sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you're reading what you want to into that.
You are also
Listen. Okay. All right. Let me, because we have to get to our topic. So let me just say, like, I mean, we keep like swiveling the conversation back around to like where I'm being an anti-mask guy. Like, again, I'm actually more than most people, and maybe even more than most Republicans, I am pro-mask. I am pro-social distancing. Be careful when you go out. Be careful when you are near an individual who has, especially if it's your family member and you're aware of it, be careful when you're near individuals who you know are at a higher risk. Just be careful. All right? That's my stance on all that, right? So I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. I just feel like we didn't really attack my central premise of the efficacy of the attempted solutions, but I suppose we did. All right.
All right. So here's one for a chuckle before we get onto the main thing, just to calm us all back down. I thought this was a hilarious news cartoon that was drawn. So if you can't see it, there's a little face of Mitch McConnell clogging the drain up. The sink's full of water. And you got some Georgia voters being the Drano clog remover. So we can get his ass out of being the Senate Majority Leader if the Georgia voters come in and vote Democrat. So I just thought that was a funny, well done cartoon. But.
All right. Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk about why me, Chris, and Tim were just fighting. Okay, so we've been thinking about this a while, and this is probably one of those topics where we've said, oh, that's a whole other podcast, probably a couple times at this point. And we've probably mentioned this in short order a couple times before. But we wanted to talk about the polarization of the United States of America. And we're going to do this a couple different ways. We're going to first talk, sort of clinically about what we think the problems on a national scale are, and then we're going to break it down where me and Chris get to throw jabs at each other and blame each of our parties for what's taking place. So, with this, I mean, do we? I think we're probably going to go a little bit late with this because we went so long with this news and memes segment, which I really enjoyed, obviously. But we'll probably go a little long with this, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. So, Tim, what do you have for statistics on this? So let's show first that there is a widening disparity in political viewpoints across the country.
Yeah, so I've felt this for a long time, and I mean, I'm pretty young, right? I'm in my 30s, and so for me to say, I've never felt this type of political divide before,
right.
Doesn't really mean a lot, right? It's pretty anecdotal. Right. When I would talk to my parents about it or other people, they'd say, yeah, it's always been this way, it's just... and so I was trying to find, like, okay, is it really? Or, I'm newer into politics
right.
in the last, 6 to 10 years, I guess. And so maybe I just didn't know. And so I started looking, and definitely, statistically, we're showing that the gap is widening between the political parties. And I thought that it was kind of neat. I found this particular animation here.
I've seen that one.
That shows, kind of the widening. And so I'll play this, but let me explain it first. It's going to show you where the Republican Party, the Republicans are here. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are from their stance. If they're consistently believing in all of their party's beliefs and how firmly and strongly they are, to being more mixed and being down the middle of the road, and then vice versa on the other side on the right here.
So I'm assuming this is a survey. Oh, that's interesting. It moves.
So this is in 1994. Then it goes to 99, and you can see that it's somewhat in the middle.
Holy cow! It's like the same thing practically.
Yeah. And then you can see in 2004, they moved, and then since 2004, it's been moving apart, and it's getting wider and wider. And so what's ended up happening is you're getting less people in the middle, less people that are close on political views and that are open to listening to the other side, and more people that are strongly believing in their political party and not really interested in the middle road, right? And it happens for both parties, kind of moving apart and spreading that gap. What's also happening is... Let's see if we can find the right one here.
I just want to say real quick,
go ahead.
I didn't think it was that. I mean, I consciously know it's that bad, but the graphical representation is actually really scary. I suppose I knew it was that bad, but I'm tempted to say I didn't know it was that bad.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Yeah, and so this one's another one that I think is interesting. So this is kind of from a similar stuff. Mm-hmm. So this shows you those graphs.
Is that Pew?
This one is Pew, yes.
Yeah, I love Pew.
So this shows you those graphs, but stationary, right? So you can see where the median Democrat and the median Republican were really close back in 94 and even in 2004.
Yeah.
But and this is there's not like a 2020 one of these, but I mean it's continued to move separate. But this one shows you that not only are we separating in our views, which may not necessarily be as bad all by itself, but we're also increasing our dislike or unfavorable view of the other party. So rather than being like, hey, yeah, I believe this and I know they believe that, and they're still good guys, right? It's not that. It's that more people are like, oh no, they're not good guys. Like they're wrong. They're a threat to the nation, right? And so you can see that feeling is coming up. And so in this particular one here, they show you in 2014, 27% of Democrats saw the Republican Party as being a threat to the nation's well-being. That's pretty strong, right?
Yep.
And the same thing for Republicans, just a little higher, 36% seeing the Democrats as a threat to the nation.
I'd love to see what that is currently. It sucks that's 6 years old. That's before Trump started running. I can't even imagine what it is now. And I wouldn't even necessarily surmise that the Republicans are, so it seems like during the Obama era, the Republicans spiked up, and I'm sure the Democrats spike up in the Republican era. I just bet, especially now, I'm sure the Republicans are at least right up there with them, if not higher again, as far as distrust for the other side.
Yeah, definitely. And so one of the things so they don't have that data to show, right, where it's showing what each individual is, but one way you can kind of glean a little bit on the divide is to look at the presidential approval rating. Is if you go back into the 50s, you can. So the first thing to look at is this line up here where it says the approval rating amongst its own party, right?
Yeah.
So you can see that across the top. It's not like that's really changing a lot, right? It does fluctuate within, but it's in the 80s. It can drop a little bit if they're not very their own party, but it's in the 80s, 88 there, 87 for Trump, right? So it's not like your own party likes you a whole lot more than it used to. But look at how bad, and you can see this trend. I mean, it's almost linear. Look at how bad the opposite party views the president, right? It's like hatred at this point. It's not like, yeah, they're okay. Some people like them, some don't, right? Like it used to be back in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s and 80s there. As you get into the late 90s and to the 90s and into the 2000s for sure, like this divide is huge.
I think the interesting thing is that, like I was tempted to say right there is just like, well, I mean, obviously that's 6. The Democrats hate Trump so much. Like, obviously it's a 6. Like, you can just look at Trump and say that's the reason. But it's a trend, right? It's very clearly a trend.
Yeah, it's a trend. And I mean, you can look at Obama here, right? And this is so when we were talking about doing this podcast, my statement was I don't actually think that Trump is the driver of this. I don't think it was like, oh my God, now I hate everyone because of Trump. I just think he fit the bill and he has like driven the wedge deeper, right?
Yeah.
But I you can see the trend clearly. And I was shocked at Obama because I always felt like Obama was somewhat bipartisanly liked.
Yeah, that's actually a no.
So definitely not, right? And so I thought that was really interesting, and you can see in a lot of different ways. I mean, here's another one, right? It's kind of the same data, but the who's approving of Donald Trump, right, and where they're at, but how wide again that the gap is, and it didn't really change throughout his presidency, right? It's not like he did something all of a sudden and everyone's like, I hate him. It's like, nah, they don't like him from the beginning. And
there was that little spike right there towards the end. Can you go back to that?
Yeah.
So, what? The heck?
2020, that's probably like right when
what?
Right
that
when
doesn't look right.
Coronavirus, right when we got announced with the coronavirus, maybe.
Oh yeah. That's early 2020. So that's actually around where Trump was saying like I had all sorts of people calling me up ready to make deals. Like he was like he did get a boost there. I mean he was very favored at that point.
Yeah, we were hopeful, and then I guess it was like nah, he was lying.
Right then, coronavirus came around. Hey, look, I'm just saying he would have gotten reelected if not for coronavirus.
I don't agree with
the coronavirus really badly.
Well, I'm not going to get into that, but I say without coronavirus, I think he would have gotten reelected, regardless of whether. Yeah,
I think it's a fair argument, but I disagree, and we've talked about it before, right?
Like
we can talk about it again, but he barely won when he did win by a slim margin, and I think if the independents,
you probably shouldn't get into it.
If the independents would have voted Democrat versus independent, he would have lost. And I think myself included, I voted independent in 2016. I did not in this election. So I think a lot of voter votes would have swung the other way anyway. But anyway, this particular one I thought was really interesting. And I have to look to see when this actual poll was. I thought it had it. Oh, here, 2020.
We can't read that. Can you read that?
Yeah, I'm going to read it to you.
Oh, no, just kidding. You just crisped up.
So the lighter color here are voters who support Trump or Biden. They firmly support Trump or Biden. And the darker color are the voters who lean Trump or Biden. And so for those who strongly support either Trump or Biden, they say they want the Biden or Trump to do what their policies are without worrying too much about how it would affect those who didn't vote for him. So if you're strongly in support of Trump or Biden, either one, you don't give a shit about the other party.
Right.
For the most part, right? Only 10% of the people that fit into that category and 13% for Trump care if the policies hurt the other people. Whereas for the people that just kind of lean that way are still in the center, they're not the far left or the far right. I'm more in that mixed group. In general, they say they want the policies to help all Americans, even if it means disappointing some of the people that supported their choice, right? And the reason I bring this up is, to me, this is huge. this, you combine that with, is it on this one? No. You combine that with whatever data I was showing before this, right? Where you're saying the people over here on the far left and on the far right, they only care about getting what they want. They don't care how it affects everybody else. And all the people in the middle, they still care about everybody else. And that's
a large portion, much larger portion than I would have thought.
Yeah. And
but
so
I
you
combine
that.
I mean, the fringe is the fringe. I mean,
but it's becoming like not the fringe, right? That's what we're showing.
I want to see like I want to see how that stat that you were just talking about moves over time. So, like, I assume those numbers of people who don't care about the rest of the country getting their stuff implemented, I would assume that number is getting bigger. But it'd be nice to see a trend line on that.
I don't know if they have that, if they've asked it.
Right?
Previously.
No. That's so hyper specific. I would be surprised if they did have that.
And another thing I thought was interesting is how widely people differ on what they care about based on their political affiliation. So for people that are Biden or lean Biden, economy's way less important than for Trump's. Healthcare's flipped, coronavirus is flipped. There's some general things that stay in the middle, Supreme Court and foreign policy and stuff, but there's a lot of things that are widely flipped. There was one that I thought was really interesting. I don't know if it was in this one or not. Yeah, and so this one here shows you the same thing we were talking about before, though, except they're really concerned that the country is going to be in dire shape if the other person gets elected. Right?
Is that most people? It's hard to see your screen. I think you're fuzzy.
Yeah,
right now.
So this one says this is the percentage of Trump supporters who say they would be concerned about the direction of the country if Joe Biden was elected president.
That's not terribly surprising.
And it's 90% the other way. Be concerned, with Trump leading. So it's very divisive, right? And it's showing that it's increasing that way. There's one more that I wanted to show that I thought was really,
and then we'll get into a conversation about why we think this is.
Yeah. So this one I thought was really interesting in that it's not just a political divide. And so there's one more piece of this. So let me show it. There's one more graph of this, but this is showing the difference in just how they feel and what they believe. So in general, liberals, they like walkable communities. They like to live in cities, whatever, right? That makes sense. That's where you see the liberals, and you see conservatives generally are out in the more rural areas, and it says they prefer more room. But if you look at it, people that are consistently liberal, 70% of them want houses that are smaller to each other and to schools, stores, and restaurants. They want to be able to walk to everything.
More community-oriented, probably city-oriented.
Yep, and consistently conservative, this top part, are heavily, they want the houses farther apart, and they want schools, stores, and restaurants miles away, right? And you can see, this is a very clear trend. If they identified as consistently liberal or mostly liberal, right? So it's really interesting, in my opinion, how that is so well aligned with your political views.
You wouldn't think it. I have speculations as to why that is, but it might not be terribly relevant for tonight, especially with our lack of time.
And then there's one last that I want to show quick. This is the one that I think is the most critical for everything. It kind of goes with the other one that we were talking about. So this says this is talking about the percentage of registered voters who, if you're a Biden voter,
bad.
How you feel about Trump supporters, or if you're a Trump supporter, how you feel about Biden supporters. This larger block here, the lighter yellow, these people say not only do we have different priorities when it comes to politics, but we fundamentally disagree about core American values. Right? And then this side over here says we have different priorities in politics, but we still share a commitment to the same core American values, right? So it's basically saying, a very small percentage of people actually think the other side values America, right? The same.
Shares the same American values.
What I feel American values are, that they feel the same way, right? That they have the core same values.
Right.
I would consider them a countryman. in a way, right? Like somebody that would share my values. And to me, that is the crux of this, is why things are so strongly divided, because people don't even think at the base that you're the same anymore, right? That your morals align with theirs. They think that you are completely unaligned, and that if you're voting for the other guy, obviously you're just, you don't believe in what I believe in, and I, it's another religion, and you're just wrong.
Right.
And we can't
Pretty much. Yeah. And I don't subscribe to your religion. So let's talk about let's talk about why we think that is. So I mean, Chris, let's start with you. Why as a so not indicting the parties, we'll get to that later where we can talk about that, but why as a whole, in a nonpartisan sort of way, why would this divide be growing over time?
It's hard to answer that without indicting parties, because I think that's like a very, very critical part of this.
Do you not have anything bipartisan? Because I mean, I could point to a few things.
I do.
Okay.
I think the one bipartisan thing, and it might overlap with you, is that I do believe this can be said, and we talked about this in the past, is that it's not, we don't have one individual funnel or like three funnels of media anymore. And I think I truly believe that's I truly believe that is creating a negative implication on the American people, because what we see is happening is that because everybody's siloed in their news feeds, we are very much one, not necessarily discerning the correct news. Two, we might be just reading things that we want to read. And three, we think that we're discerning the correct news, and we think the other side is discerning incorrect news.
Yeah.
So at the same time that we're actually being reading potentially false information, so is the other side, but we believe that we're actually correct and the other side is wrong, when both people are receiving biased news. Whereas, in the past, not like news was unbiased. You have yellow journalism and whatnot.
Right, but we at least all were drinking from the same well.
Exactly.
Right. Even if my guys will say, oh, it was even a little liberally biased back then. Sure, fine. But we all were sort of working with the same set of facts. And I do firmly believe that the news was a little bit less editorialized in a more biased fashion back then anyways. So it was a little bit more fact oriented. I think there was a lot less focus on the fiery opinion pieces and the opinion panels and the panelists who have have opinions about this, that, and the other thing. I don't think that was as much of a thing back then. And I mean, you're right. There's a lot of overlap. We agree on the fact that, and I call this the information silo, and that's that we all used to drink from the same well, and now we're off in our own silos where we people my age are going on YouTube. They're finding whatever channel directly confirms their preconceived biases, and then they're imbibing that, right? And I'm a classic case of that. Maybe not as bad as some people, because I do have a variety of people that I listen to, but they are pretty much all on the right, and I agree with them all on some key issues. Otherwise, I wouldn't be watching them, because it just wouldn't appeal to me. And that seems to be the way that we're going, right? And on top of that, right, so it's not just news per se, right? It's not just news organizations per se. It's the fact that all of our social media algorithms are specifically designed to deliver us, number one, content that's addicting by nature. It's content that gets the most likes and clicks, which is the most addicting content. And number two, it's also what we like and are addicted to, and what hits us the most. And that is a perfect shitstorm for just completely delivering us 24/7 our preconceived notions and biases, and we never ever see what the opponents are saying. Like for example, I mean, what kind of brought this up, Tim, if you remember, was there was a Breonna Taylor meme that you saw. What was it? Do you remember?
I don't remember now.
So if I recall correctly, there was a Breonna Taylor meme. It was something on Reddit where somebody posted a Breonna Taylor meme, and they said something that the moderators of the subreddit didn't like. It was something about, oh man, I forget what it is now too. But they were like, somebody got banned from the subreddit for suggesting that Breonna Taylor was awake when she got shot. And it was a meme to illustrate that people just absolutely are not working with the same set of facts. Like, the only examples I have are right-wing examples, so I'm going to not list them out. But in general, it seems that almost all of the Black Lives Matter icons, almost all of them, end up actually going through the court system, and it turns out that the cop did nothing wrong. Almost all of them. There were some of them that absolutely deserved to be put in jail, the cops. But we're not working with the same set of facts. And the thing is that, like those stories, and any story where, say, a right-wing person has to issue a correction because they're wrong, nobody pays attention to the correction and nobody issues the correction. So it's like, because the correction's not popular. And it's like, we're just literally not working with the same set of facts anymore at all.
Yep. But the funny thing is, most people know that, right?
They do.
Most people know that their news site is skewing the data, or that is putting data up that's fake. And actually, not to cut in there real quick, but look, they did a survey where it shows, like, most people, Trump supporters, this was Trump and Biden supporters, but it doesn't matter. Like, left and right, doesn't matter. Most people on both left and right know that their source is not being neutral, right? They're very partisan, and in some cases, reporting made up information, just intended to mislead the public. Like,
wow, that kind of looks like Republicans are a little bit more woke than Democrats right there.
Yeah, so when I looked at this data first, I saw two ways of interpreting it, and I don't know which is the right way. One way is the right wing
is worse.
Well, yeah, exactly. One way is the way you said, which is the right wing is more aware that their media is skewed or making things up. Or the other one is that they're more aware because their media actually makes up more shit.
Well, maybe disagree there, I guess.
So it's a tough one. Like, I'd have to do more research to know which way it really is, or if there's another way to interpret it.
That's probably almost impossible to research, because you'd have to make factual claims.
It's interesting enough to me for this argument to say that most people know that everything's biased, but they're still letting it divide them. Is really why I had that data pulled. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was pretty much the crux of it. I mean, I'll give you guys a chance to respond to that. I mean, media, so algorithms specifically, social media algorithms are literally designed to show people what they want and not what the other side, not what they need to hear, right? And this is not me making an argument that they need to be displaying those things. I'm just saying that the way that it is, there's probably no way out of this pit right now, because it's inherently unpopular. You're not going to show up in somebody's feed if they don't want you there, basically. And there's no way to fix that currently, the way that things are. Any disagreement there? Because I mean, we can move on to indicting each other. That should be more fun. But look. So my main point moving forward is that we're about to break into the segment where we talk about what each other's parties are doing wrong, and both of our parties are doing stuff wrong. Don't get it twisting. But like, the important thing to know is that that stuff is almost chump change in compared to the fact that all of these problems, these sort of passive problems that are not going away, exist in the middle, and they're affecting everybody just about equally, and they're not going away. Like, and these problems need to be fixed, and those like our other problems are not going to get fixed until those problems are fixed. That's my main point. All right.
Yeah, I generally agree. I think the media is one of the biggest proponents of this, but I don't think it's just media. I think the parties themselves are doing it.
Okay, well, we can get into the partisanship of it, but as long as we agree that there are those sort of bipartisan issues with the divide, like, we can move into the partisanship. So, let's do this. Chris, why don't you go first? Why don't you indict the Republican Party? So specifically, we're talking about what the parties are doing wrong that is driving the divisions in the country.
Sure. So, relatively brief, because honestly, I think I can tackle this in a sense of brevity, especially because I realize we're running a minute late, but it's okay. This is fun. Essentially, and it actually very much reflects the graphs that Tim had shared out, the biggest divide that I think the Republicans help perpetuate in this country really starts kicking off around 2008. We see a couple major things begin happening, especially during the Obama administration. And before, you bring up the wall, like, well, everything isn't just about Obama. Like, a lot of it actually kind of is. Around those are major turning points of where we first begin to see very, very technical, strategic, high levels of Republican obstructionism. And that is really, I think, the obstruction mentality of Republican Party at Capitol Hill is, I really believe, is one of the strongest things that have caused the strongest forces that have caused the separation in our country. And I know you're going to tackle stuff on my side, but for your side, I really believe this is a really big problem. So what ends up happening is, 2008 rolls around, Obama's elected, the Republicans are desperate. They've lost the House, the Senate, this presidency. What do you do, right? What do you do in that situation? And so actually at the time, and there's a great political article on this that I'll send out to you guys that also really outline this, but around that time, Mike Pence was the head of one of the major Republican conventions or strategic parties internal of the National League of Republicans. And basically they comprise a strategy that, going forward, no matter how much they actually agree with Democratic policies, no matter how much they may think that there's a compromise, there's no more compromise going forward. Like zero compromise. And instead, they're going to be...
What year was this?
2008.
Right away.
What?
Right, so right away after he got elected.
Essentially, within the year of 2008, 2009. So when the strategy comes out, and it worked. They flipped the one of the houses, right? They flipped part of Congress, the Senate. You end up with continued obstructionism. You end up with piecemeal affordable health care getting passed through. You end up with, now obviously the kitchen table items get passed through just fine, but the big ticket items that actually move the country forward, even where there could have been compromise, keep in mind, Bush administration wanted to have what would now be seen as very liberal immigration reform. At the time, it was moderate immigration reform. It was compromised immigration reform. Kind of got tabled because of 9/11. But that's something that George Bush was going to be doing. You can go look that up. Like so those middle issues totally gone now. So, and additionally, it was that there was an intensive scheme to call out the president on everything, scrutinize the Democrats on everything they possibly could. I'm not saying these things didn't happen before, but not in this type of flamboyant dynamic. And so ends up what's happening is it would have been politically uncalled for in the past to have something like a Merrick Garland incident. That's the easiest one. That's the one that's on all of our minds. But there's a million other things that occurred in the Obama administration that would have been considered obstructionism. And now we're going to see that again. And it's something that we've seen through the Trump administration. But I guarantee already you have Republican senators gearing up to start being like, well, fiscal management. And it's like, all right, we're, you want to talk about the debt ceiling and force Biden to cut spending by holding the debt ceiling thing, but then you look at the Trump administration, and so not only is there Republican obstructionism, but there's hypocrisy as a product of the obstructionism, like very, very black and white hypocrisy, not just like, all right, politically convenient, not just like, oh, all right, but like Marco Rubio calling out Ivy Leaguers. That's a trivial incident, but it speaks to a larger qualm that there is very hypocritical obstructionism. Finally, I think, whereas you guys, I'm going to say one last thing and then I'll move on. Whereas I know you guys, I guess you guys, at the most part, denounce white supremacy, we don't think it goes far enough. And so that divide, obviously, on the left, it gets aggravating because it almost comes to this point. It's like where Charlottesville happens. And it wasn't until like everyone's like, Trump, you need to call this out, that he finally calls it out. Mitch McConnell and whatnot taking time to call these things out. Currently, most of the Senate, not only 25 elected Republicans in the entire Congress have come forward and said, yes, Biden has won the election. These types of obstruction mentalities, I'm only touched on a little bit, but these types of mentalities of like protecting the minority of voters that are racist. I get it. I guess they have the right to have hate speech, but it's problematic, and these things divide the right and the left further. All you, man, have fun.
Okay, so you know what I'm going to say, that the Democrats have deepened the obstructionism. They've taken the obstructionism to at least the same level, if not throughout the Trump campaign. Or I'm sorry, the Trump presidency. I don't think we disagree on that.
Yeah.
I would argue they went further, but I think we can at least agree that the Democrats are doing the same exact thing at this point. For example, the Republicans have put forward like 4 or 5 COVID relief bills, and it's Nancy Pelosi who was holding it up. So, I mean, like, that's the COVID relief bill. That's the care that people need. So all right, I'm not going to hammer that. So I think both people are doing it right now. Now I'm going to ask you, like, of everything that you just said, are those things not identifiable by the trends that Tim just showed us? Like, you're basically saying the parties have drifted apart and they've become more obstructionist against each other. It was bad during Obama and it got worse during President Trump's presidency because we're polarized, right? And that polarization can be attributed to the polarization at large, like what's going on with the information silos and people not listening to each other. And it's funny that you bring up racism and Republicans defending white supremacists and Donald Trump not denouncing white supremacy. It's funny that you bring it up because that is a direct tie to what I was just talking about, that we were just talking about, with both sides not working with the same set of facts. Because there is, and I know I've mentioned this before, there's a 9-minute video of Donald Trump denouncing white supremacy at various times throughout his presidency. 9 minutes of him denouncing white supremacy. And 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of those times were right after Charlottesville. And like you and most Democrats, like, people are just not working with those facts. Like, those are facts. He did do that. He denounced white supremacy, right? And Republicans do denounce white supremacy. Republicans were responsible for stripping Steve King of all of his committee duties after he made a white nationalist, not even white supremacist, just a white nationalist comment. They stripped him of all of his duties because that's not Republicanism, right? And it's like, if you knew that and 1,000 other facts that I'm privy to because I listen to Ben Shapiro and all the people who defend the right and bring forward the facts that defend the right, if we all were all working with those facts, we need to have
the same thing.
What's that?
I said facts and opinions aren't the same thing.
I'm talking about facts.
I know, but sometimes you and Chris and everybody, right?
Yes, I know. I know the distinction.
What I want to focus on more than anything other than race is the obstructionism that comes from the Republican Party.
But do you think that's it? But as we just discussed, that's no longer, even if it did start during the Obama era, which I would contest. I would assume it's probably a graph, much like the widening gap that Tim just showed us. I would assume that's how obstructionism started working. Even if it is the case that it started during the Obama era, it is now officially confirmed that the Democrats are fully on board with the same exact tactics.
Oh, totally, because they have to. Because if they're not, then what do, right? We can't just we can't just say, all right, hypocrisy. Like, we kind of have to be a little bit more aggressive now because there's no. What are we supposed to do, man? What's the alternative? Yeah. Should we just keep getting trampled?
Well, yeah, I think to Chris's point a little bit, like, if one side, if there used to be compromise, and then one side says, no, we're not going to compromise anymore. We're not going to let this go through until we get our way. If the other side just says, okay, fine, and then just starts putting stuff through, then all of their policies will end up never getting put through. So then they have to step up the game and also be obstructionist. And then that pushes the game up further on the other side. And I think it just grows both ways, right? Regardless of who is responsible for starting it, I think it only results in both sides doing the same thing.
Okay, so let me explain real quick. So the obstructionism, quote unquote, to Obama, I need to understand, like, I've tried to make this point before. I don't think you guys quite got it back then, and maybe you'll get it now, maybe you won't. Maybe you did get it back then, maybe I misunderstood. But we keep talking about compromises if it's a good thing, right? You say maybe Republicans should have compromised with Obama. The issue is that Obama is and was, especially for the time, was a progressive, and he was trying to implement a national healthcare system that the Republicans absolutely 100% fundamentally disagree with. So them obstructing on that is very according to their sort of mandate from their voters. Like, that was a massive step forward. That was something that the Republican Party absolutely 100% didn't want. So so you saying that that non-compromising. So let me put it this way: putting forward that idea specifically. Let's talk about the ACA. was a non-compromising move by President Obama, because he knows that the Republicans are fundamentally opposed to anything like that.
What about other dynamics? I understand healthcare, how you can see that there's a problem with that. There's a whole other slew of issues of things that have been impacted by the Republican Party. The removal of the 2/3 majority vote, the blocking of Merrick Garland, the specific, all right, we need to obstruct at no matter at any cost. So let's vote to remove the 2/3 majority vote because we at least have a simple majority, and then boom, block Merrick Garland. And how many other things have been able to be passed without any input of Democrats? I get it. I get it. For you guys, it's a major win, right? Cool. We get to pass the bills we want to have. We get the tax relief we want to have. Thank God you guys didn't get to block the Affordable Care Act because McCain was like, my dying vote. But right. But there's other issues that there's so many bills that have been pushed through that should have been compromise based. They're meant to be messy. They're meant to be, aggravating. They're meant to be that at the end of the day, you walk out and don't get everything you want. But because they're removing those 2/3 majority vote, now it's like, under Trump, you would have had 3 Supreme Court justices that were Republican anyways. But the difference is you would have had 3 courts justices that wouldn't have been contested the way Brett Kavanaugh would have been contested, because it would have been a bipartisan appointment for it to begin with.
Okay, but that non-bipartisan of Supreme Court nominees started with literally Joe Biden, with I forget his first name, but Justice Bork, or not Justice Bork.
No, it started with Merrick Garland. It started with
wait, it was like back in the 70s. Joe Biden was literally the first person to attack somebody. So before Joe Biden did this, it was like a nothing when Supreme Court justices were put forward. It was like, okay, this is the one the president wants to put forward, we'll put him forward. And then Joe Biden started the tradition of raking new candidates over the coals for personal reasons, or asking them how they would rule this way or that way, like all that kind of bullshit. Like, it's actually kind of funny he's the president now, but
I don't know. I had to look into that particular one more to know. But
yeah, Bork is the name.
I think the way you're wording it definitely insinuates that Biden was being political in this decision, when it's very possible, and I'm not saying it's either way, I don't know.
Oh,
it's very possible that the justice that was being put forth was one of the first ones that people felt was not really qualified, or was extremely politically partisan rather than...
Could be, but then why didn't we go back to the norms?
It's exactly to the point we're talking about, though, is because things are becoming more divided, right? This is the new norm. One of the things that I think is interesting is that, you guys are talking about how, the Republican Party is at fault because they did X, Y, and Z, and the Democratic Party is at fault because they did X, Y, and Z, but nobody's talking about the underlying cause or why both these parties did it, right? It's not one party or the other, and it's not about how the one party did it versus the other. They both have done it, and they both used some of the same tactics, and others have and used some of the tactics that the other one hasn't used as much. But they're both responsible for pushing for this divide, and the reason is twofold. One is that they want to remain in power. It's about being in power. It's not about representing what the people want. It's about keeping their party in power. And how do you do that? You get voters out and you get donations. And it just so happens that people that are convicted more often vote, and people that are convicted donate more money. And guess what? I've got data. So this particular graph shows that people that are consistently liberal, 58% of the people that consider themselves consistently liberal vote every time. And as you get more into the people that are bipartisan or mixed or less convicted into politics, they vote less often. Same thing for the conservative side, right? They vote more often if they're very convicted.
Yeah, which makes sense.
And so how, as a party, do you get people to come out and vote? Well, you drive a divide, and you make the other person the enemy. You start focusing on emotion, and you start focusing on the popularism that brings out these emotions, so that people become convicted. And the unfortunate side effect of that, which I don't think is necessarily their intended side effect, is that we have a country that's divided, right? They just want to be in power. They don't necessarily want you to hate your neighbor, but this is the way they did it. And the same thing goes for political contributions. If you are convicted with your party, you're more likely to contribute. Right. So I think, in my opinion, it's because parties wanted to stay in power. They were looking for ways to do that, and they felt like driving at emotions and driving at the extremes of people and causing them to become more convicted, it would be helpful to them. And the unfortunate side effect is that by being more convicted, we are now more angry at the person that doesn't believe us. Similar to attacking somebody's religion. Now, when you attack their political party, you're attacking kind of their religion because they're so strongly convicted.
Right. So Chris, my point is somewhat close to Tim's, and I'll wrap it up and let you respond, and then I'll go into my unique assessment of why the left is driving the division uniquely. But my point is, it's a combination of what Tim is saying and back to what we were just saying, which is that from what I'm hearing from you right now, is it sounds like so you have a whole bunch of examples of how the Republicans are responsible for. They were the first ones to majorly obstruct a president ever, right? And it's like
not ever, but in like recent times,
right? It feels to me like, again, because I have all of these facts about Democrats doing it in the recent days, and I was not politically aware back in the Bush days, so unfortunately I can't speak to those. But it just feels to me like you're literally living in what we were just talking about, where you have that one set of facts. It's much like me. Like I have all of the conservative takes on all of these things, but like I feel like your sources are telling you that Republicans are unique in this evil when it's more bipartisan.
I really do have to disagree on that. Although I think as of starting right now, yeah, you're going to see a lot of Democratic obstructionism against Republicans. But I think there was a specific endured. It was literally like to the meeting minutes, the actual strategy of the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
That's like actually like what your strategy was. It was like, let's not compromise, let's obstruct. And I'm not talking obstruction as in like the right, the fun type of stuff that you see in the news and whatnot. I'm talking about like actual procedural things within the Capitol Hill that have led to like, some things going mainstream like Merrick Garland and whatnot. But ultimately, yeah, I do think it's a Republican. It's the actual strategy, and now Democrats have to adapt that strategy. We have no choice.
Well, I think if you guys were better than us, let's say if you were principled, you would hold to the norms and set the standard again. I don't know. That goes for both sides. That goes for both sides. I'm not attacking you on that. I'm just one of those things is like violence always spirals unless there's a principled person who steps in. Always. So that's both.
That's what I would like to see. It'd be great to see if Joe Biden is going to be that president, but
I would hope.
It takes both sides, though, right? He wants to be, but it takes both sides in a sense too, right? So Biden himself can be a compromising, try to be a reconstructionist president. But then if you have things like Republicans blocking his cabinet positions, which they have every power to do, not every right, but they have the power to. But where does that leave Biden?
I suppose because they have the power. Well, okay. So then let me get into my indictments because that's not. So part of the problem, Chris, is that Biden is not necessarily. He's not the moderate he claims, or if he is, he's not appointing the moderates that are like him, right? And so
he's appointing hyper moderates. The left is super pissed.
Okay, but some of his people are still further left than the right would want, right? I understand that the far left is not happy with his picks, but the picks that he still picked are still very, very unsavory to the right.
That's generally called compromise, right? No side is extremely happy, but both sides
that's the Democrats internally compromising, which means it's way further away from the Republicans than we would like. If he was compromising with Republicans, that would be a different story. Makes sense? So let me just put this out there. You guys can sort of agree, disagree in a couple sentences. There are two schisms going on right now. It seems very apparent to me that the right is splitting, and the line seems to be somewhere along whether you believe that the election was stolen or not. I think the right is firmly split in half over this right now, and this may eventually end up splitting into populists versus rhinos. And on the left, there's progressives versus mainstream Democrats, and that is manifesting in a wider and wider split. Do you guys disagree or agree? I think we could have four parties here.
I think that there's some. I definitely think that there's some of that, and you can kind of look at the data that I showed earlier, and to show that you have these spikes on the extremes of the left and the right, and you still have a mass in the middle. And it's kind of what you're saying, right? You have these extremes, the people that are extreme partisan on the Republican side, and they're like, look, I'm going to believe whatever the party says. Whatever the party says is the truth.
It's not just far right. There's an actual ideological split versus populism, which is not far right. Populism versus... when I say far right, I purely meant on that graph that I showed earlier. Okay.
Sorry. Let me say convicted right. Right? Like, they're so convicted in their party.
You're still talking hard right. You're talking people who are very right. I'm saying that there are these movements are not necessarily left or right of each other on the right. There's populism up top versus just conservatives sort of down bottom. Like, it's not a left-right issue in the Conservative Party. We're split like horizontally or vertically.
Yeah, I see the split happening in a different way. I don't think it's about how far left or right you are from a political belief spectrum. I think it's how convicted you are in your party, right? Like, I am so convicted that the Republican Party is correct in everything that obviously the election was stolen because they said it was.
Maybe.
Right? That's what I'm not saying they may be very moderate on their political views.
Right.
But on the left, I agree with you in general. I think that there's a move to push really far left, and then there's still the moderate left.
What do you think about that, Chris?
How divided it is, though.
I mean, I think overall, pretty much I'm in agreement on that. I think right now one of the best things that we can do to reconcile, I think, as moving forward, is like we need to be acknowledging of the extremes that we have and start trying to rein them in a little bit. I do wholeheartedly believe that something you said earlier that really caught my attention is that, yeah, you're right. Violence on violence, we're just going to keep getting into this hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And at some point, we got to both just say, like, all right, where's the middle ground? Or at least, like, what can we do that actually, provides some sort of productivity?
All right, hold on. Before you get all huggy, let me indict the Democrats real quick, and then we'll talk about solutions. We'll talk about solutions in our closing statements. So I have two things, and I'll go with this the one that I was going to do second because it sort of relates to Joe Biden. I'll give you one example to prove it, or just to illustrate it, more to speak. So my first issue that is more unique to the left is, and you're going to probably disagree with this because you think Republicans are racist, but the left's philosophy is inherently tribal by design, right? So it used to be that Marxists, it was bourgeoisie versus proletariat, right? And so then you would divide those two classes, and then you could always figure out a way to put somebody in the bourgeoisie so you could take them down. And that was essentially, early 1900s cancel culture, which involved killing them and raping their daughters. But the modern switch is that we've moved into a sort of a racial or sex characteristics or gender or whatever it is. We divide ourselves along 1,000 different lines, and this completely has to do with intersectionality, right? So what I'm talking about is intersectionality. So the left actually breaks things down along tribal lines. Like, you are part of the Black community, or you're part of the LGBTQ community, or you're part of whatever community it is, right? The white people don't have a community, but you are part of the white person group, right? This is an inherent part of the far left's philosophy. It is divisive. It is divisive on purpose. And I think that is something more unique to the left. I know you're gonna say that there's the right is racist and therefore that's a group thing. I've always maintained that the actual racists in the Republican Party is about 1% to 2%, and we don't give a shit about them. They have nothing to do with conservatism. So, regardless, I would say that is a problem with the left.
I think
Go ahead.
Our counter to that is basically, wholeheartedly, I think the problem we believe on the right is that you are overlooking very clear dynamics that impact the social navigation of individuals. And it's not to say that, hey, here's tribalism and here's a badge and here's how you need to be identified only, but there is merit and importance in diversity hiring. There's merit and importance in multilingual staffing. I think the fun thing that the right likes to talk about is like diversity in thought. And sure, you don't have diversity in thought, but diversity in race matters too. Diversity in all of the above. And so, and really what that matters is that, what?
Why does it matter what color somebody's skin is?
Because when a black student comes into my office and is able to talk to a black woman who holds a bachelor's degree, who's highly successful, they're able to see themselves in her. When we have a student that comes into my office that is struggling as a young man and is able to see another young individual that's a man, myself, being successful in life, they're able to see themselves in what I'm doing.
Okay. All right. Listen, I'm not going to argue with you in your sort of edge case. Your edge case is sort of like caseworkers.
It's not an edge case.
Or public-facing positions. So why should it matter that an engineer's race?
Because you're going to be bringing in the issue with that is there's plenty of capable African American and black engineers who have not been hired, or rather culture has made it so that they're not. All right, this is going to be such a podcast conversation that
I know.
I'm going to miss some points right now. But the major thing is for instance, here's something. Nate, if me, you, an African American, and a woman, and a Hispanic individual all had to take a SAT right now, and we're all at the exact same math level, and this is a tried and true study across hundreds of thousands of people. This is not some bullshit like voodoo tribalism study. This is a real thing that happens. If you ask people before to take that study to identify your race and identify your gender, the individuals who have to acknowledge, and if you ask them to verbally acknowledge, they will do disproportionately worse on their SAT test than if they didn't have to acknowledge their race and if they didn't have to acknowledge they're a woman.
Are you saying that it impacts minorities or everybody?
It impacts minorities and it impacts women.
What?
Because there's so many cultural prejudices. The conclusion here is that sociology is a real thing. It's not some bullshit textbook that.
I know.
So the conclusion is that by having to do that, they then are worried that they had to provide that information.
No. It's subconscious. It's entirely subconscious.
That sounds like speculation to me.
I'm interested to look into this one because that
could you? Yeah, let's talk about that some other time.
I'm happy to. I gotta look it up. I have a book on it.
I would love to see that.
It's a real thing.
That's an interesting one.
It's a real thing.
I believe you.
Let me just put it this way, Chris. So you're gonna have interesting and good arguments. I mean, this is why I talk to you, is because you do have interesting and good arguments. But my problem is more meta than whether your arguments have merit. Right. This is one of those things like if you believe in the American dream, you can actually go out and work for it because you believe in it. If you don't, you might be less inclined to go do that. This is kind of the same argument on my side. So if you encourage a black person if you evangelize to a black person and you tell them that you are a black person, you are a black woman, you have all of these intersecting traits that are working against you, that person is less likely to succeed because you have told them that they're less likely to succeed.
No, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. They're going to struggle on that test, or they're going to struggle in the dynamic because there's so many cultural normative stereotypes, prejudices that they have internalized that therefore results in an outcome that is negative. But if we're able to celebrate diversity, if we're able to increase diversity hiring, then being around people of different races directly correlates into reducing your own implicit biases negative standards. And by doing that at a national level or a highly local level, integration in the workforce, integration in schools, these types of things will generally improve the stereotype. So then eventually we will reach that point in 100 years or so where a young black kid takes a test, and if they write that their ethnicity is African American or black, and you write that your ethnicity is white Caucasian, then that you guys will not have an outcome that is differentiated based on your race.
Okay.
We need to have diversity so we can overcome this in the next generation.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So conversation. I like it. I love it. And that is a longer conversation, but this to the right's perspective, the left inherently, not even saying that you are doing this on purpose, but you encourage and explicitly tell people to define themselves by their race and other characteristics, man, woman, whatever it is. And so along those lines, there is increased tribalism. Especially whites against black. Racial tensions have gone up skyrocketed after Obama was elected, and you can say it was because of that, but it was more the intersectional stuff. I promise. But look, okay, we're going to disagree. Okay, go ahead, Tim, real quick. Go ahead.
Well, one, I was going to say you do that a lot, where you're like, you're going to say this, but you're wrong. Just believe me. Which, obviously, we're talking about this because
I'm telling you to believe me that this is what the Republicans say. I'm not telling you to believe my argument. Well, I'm saying agree to disagree. You're just gonna have to believe that this is what the Republicans say.
Well, I believe you that that's what they say, but that's a different statement than saying you're going to say it's because it was Obama, but believe me, it's not. It's because of these other things.
That is only because it's 11 o'clock and we don't have time.
So I mean, I'd say be more careful a little bit and say this is what we believe.
I'll try. I'm trying to, I have a whole other argument and we still got to sign off. So I'm sorry about that. I do that sometimes. I'm sorry.
But what I was trying to get to before I got onto that that particular tangent was, I agree with you that I think the left does push for identifying within different groups more often, but I don't think that those identities cause tribalism within the groups. Like, I don't look at someone that identifies as LGBTQ and say, "Oh, I'm not LGBTQ, so I don't like you." Right? Like, I don't care that they identify.
There is, though. You're not paying enough attention. So there's a group of radical feminists called TERFs. TERFs are trans exclusionary radical feminists, and those are a group of radical feminists who...
There's radical groups everywhere, just like the good old boys, right? I mean,
okay.
I'm not saying that those don't happen. I'm saying that, in my opinion, just because you have somebody identify as something or form a group, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be tribal and antithesis.
Okay, but with respect, I'm telling you that those divisions are manifesting right now. There are TERFs versus trans rights. There are there's a whole bunch more. So Islam got lumped in on the far left coalition. There's inherent differences between the philosophy or religion of Islam and most of LGBTQ. There's just like all of these different groups have slightly competing interests, right? So, for example, for any feminist, as soon as you advance trans rights, women's rights sort of get inherently erased, right? There's competing interests, and these are a whole bunch of tribes. It's a coalition that was put together, and they don't all have the same interests, but you are encouraged to be put into your tribe.
I actually think that it sparks good conversation because you have people of similar points of views. Well, this is different, but yeah. But you have people of similar points of views that are able to lobby for their point of view. But just because I'm in LGBTQ doesn't mean that I can't be in another group, right? If they were mutually exclusive, if they were like, "Wow, you joined this group, so you can't be part of that," right? But it's not. It's like, who are you? Here's other people that are like you, right? Like, talk to them, learn from them, talk with other groups. Like that to me is not a negative thing. So I'm not even casting it as a mostly negative thing. I won't even do that right now. All I'm going to say is that it does result in tribalism, and I outlined some concrete points on how it does. I'm not saying that it's obviously not poorly intentioned. That's not my contention. My contention is that tribalism results in conflict of interest, which is bad. It's increased tribalism. I don't think conflict of interest is bad. When you're talking about it in that aspect.
All right, it's getting late. We'll get off that point. Then my one other point, and then we'll finish up, is that the left uniquely among all people right now. So since the 90s, since the 80s and 90s, the cultural right has lost its grip over culture, and they no longer are capable of doing this thing, which is now unique to the left, and that is purity tests and cancel culture. So the left, more than anything that I can remember in my lifetime, has taken up the mantle of the pearl-clutching religious right back in the 80s and 90s, where you couldn't blasphemy, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. Your TVs have to not have swearing in case my kids hears it. All of that pearl clutching. You can't say anything bad about trans people. You can't make bad jokes about trans people. You can't make LGBTQ jokes. You can't say this. You can't say that. Like all of that, and being canceled for it, getting fired from your job, getting fired from your political position, getting fired as a comedian. All of that is coming from the left right now. Like the right is 100% at this point, and I know that it's a pendulum, so I'm not going to pretend that this was never the right's problem. The pendulum has swung fully towards the left being intolerant of speech, that criticizes, that makes jokes about sensitive topics or quote unquote sensitive topics, or just I'll leave it at that.
I agree. I mean, really, I agree with that. I think that's one of the fallacies of the left, and I hope that Republicans can agree as much as I agree with this on their side of like obstructionism as a problem. But I wholeheartedly agree that cancel culture is really problematic. I will go as far. I will say this: there is something to be said about formalities, political decencies. There's something to be said about keeping things to a certain standard. Now, swearing on TV, yeah, let's stop that. Like James Gunn being fired from Guardians of the Galaxy because of something he tweeted 15 years ago. We're supposed to be the believers of forgiveness and redemption and growth, and
right.
I wholeheartedly believe that. Right, but when it comes down to there's
Twitter was around.
If someone's out there in the public, profusely spouting intolerance, then yeah, we shouldn't give a spotlight to that. We should do something in terms of quote unquote canceling it. But when it comes to, and I realize that you guys are going to be like, well, what about Milo Yiannopoulos and all these people coming to college campus? Yeah, that's wrong. People shouldn't be storming and rioting and all that type of stuff.
No,
we already agreed on that.
They just shouldn't go in the first place. That's the thing. You should not show up. But I agree in terms of for the mass problems of cancel culture. Like I just saw something about like someone freaking out on like some pop star for just something really silly and making them. The singer of Pete Wentz, or not the singer, the bassist of Fall Out Boy, Pete Wentz. I remember like he's actually part black, and so he came out and said something because he's actually like his hair is naturally like nappy, and like I remember one time he actually wore his hair naturally instead of straightening it, and it's like emo hair, and to be like, look at you culturally appropriating when he's like actually he's like black, like so. It's just that type of stuff. There's just no energy for it, but yeah, I denounce it.
Okay. All right. Well, then no need to belabor the point. By
the way, Twitter was around 15 years ago. It was founded.
What was it? 2009 Twitter started? When was that? 2005?
14 years ago. Okay. So.
Oh, jeez. Stop it, Timothy. That's not nice. Okay. So, all right. So how we fix this? Well, I think not being partisan. So first of all, shows like this. It's very hard for, I think, and we're going to experience these problems, and I think we are experiencing these problems, not to say we're golden at this point, but it's going to be hard to make shows like this and ideas like this become viral because half the time, so think about it. If we have somebody from the far left who really needs to hear me say something, or somebody from the far right who really needs to hear how Chris is a compassionate person and has some good points, those people spend a half at least to a third of or 2/3 of this podcast having their feelings hurt and being slightly uncomfortable and being made to question their worldview. And people just likely aren't going to stick around for it. And I'm sure there is a small appetite or maybe even a decent appetite for what we do. But it's very hard because it's not going to be addicting. And I think there's ways we can overcome that. But as a general statement across the country, it's going to be very hard to reverse even if we were, it would be even hard to freeze the polarization in place, let alone to reverse it. It's kind of like the deficit. But I think one thing that could happen is more shows like this, and the second thing that could happen is we need to tweak social justice algorithms. Oh my God, I'm tired. Jeez, social media algorithms. Yeah, your social justice algorithms that are just taking us down. No, your social media algorithms need to be tweaked to show you a little bit less of what you want to see. I hate to say that because that just means people are going to stop using the apps, but I see no other way around it. We're just being shown what we want to see 24/7, and that needs to stop. Otherwise, we're never going to come back together again because we are working with two sets of facts, and that's how it is.
I agree. I think that's the easiest fix going forward, and I think bringing back the 2/3 majority vote in the Senate.
Yeah, I would be in favor of that, actually. So, Tim,
I think the Senate, the 2/3 majority vote helps in the political side, but I don't think that helps on the population
polarization side. No, it was just a jab, but it's a jab I agree with. So
I think for me, as I kind of stated before, I think the biggest thing is that on a sociological level, politics has moved from like a secondary group, right? So in sociology, not to get too far off in this, you have primary groups. It's like your family, your religion, these things that you identify with as a core of your being, right? You're an American. These things are super strong to you. Somebody insults that. Somebody comes at your family. You're defending that with everything you are, right? That kind of mentality. Then you have secondary groups and tertiary groups and all these others. And historically, your political, for most people, your political affiliation was not in a primary group. It was in a weaker group. And I think now through media, exactly what you've been saying, which is media siloing and information siloing, as well as those parties pushing for villainization, if that's a word, of the other party to drive this emotional divide, to force you to be more consistently and strongly opinionated, so you will vote more often and donate more often. In my opinion, is a cause. So I 100% agree with you on some of the things we need to do to fix it. One of them is exactly what we're doing here. I think we need to make an effort to talk to people that have other points of views that are in the other group and listen to them open-mindedly, right? And just hear what they have to say and realize that like you said today, you're like, hey, I thought this person was smart and they believed this.
Right.
Like that's an amazing thing to realize. And when I know when Trump was running, a couple of my friends, I was talking to him and I was like, so who are you going to vote for? Like with the thought of like, obviously you're not going to vote for Trump. And they're like,
right,
yeah. But I'm like, huh? Like, what? Like we'd never had those conversations before. And so talking to people, especially people that
make you feel uncomfortable.
Well, that and you respect already.
Yeah.
Talk to them about these things that are considered taboo, but do it in a way that you're not offending each other, right? Don't lose friends over this. But you're going to come to find out that you're actually in your circle. I think more people find out that these people believe different things than you.
The real people, not the people on Twitter.
Right, and you still respect them. So it might help us be able to respect the other side a little bit more. I also think we need to be more aware of what politics is. I think we need to look at it from a humanity level. Like, what are these things that we're doing? Why are we putting these policies in place? How do they help everybody? Not just how do they help me or how do they hurt this guy or, things like that. We need to try and be a little more high level when we're looking at things so that we can empathize, I guess, with the other groups and other people. And that's kind of goes back into the first thing we were saying. As far as the social media and the news, for me, I'm all about free speech. I don't really want to regulate these large social media companies too much. I think that they're in such a weird gray area where they're not really publishing anything, but they're also able to limit what you see. And I get that there's a gray area there. I don't know the best answer, but I would like to see, and I don't know how to implement this without affecting free speech, and I don't want government in control of what we get to see, right? I don't want that at all. But I would like to see some way or another, some sort of regulations on, if you call yourself a news company, you're liable for non-factual information that's being put forth. Similar, like I think of it like with whiskey, right? You can't call yourself a bourbon unless you're distilled in Kentucky or whatever, right? Like you can call yourself a whiskey and a bourbon like whiskey, but you can't say
I'll
I'm
call
bourbon.
myself whatever
Right.
I want to.
You can't call yourself a news channel if news is the word you want to use or whatever,
Yeah.
unless you have some of requirement to have proof of the facts that you're showing, to try and help people. It's almost like a self fact check to force these agencies to come out and say, to help people understand what they're seeing. If you don't want to watch news, that's fine, right? Like if Tucker Carlson just says, "Hey, this is an opinion show, not a news show," and people still watch him, I think that's fine. There's no problem with that. But I think I would like to see something that helps people know, okay, I'm watching this. This is more factual, and I can trust it, versus being confused by stuff.
Yeah, I mean that comes with its own set of problems. I see what you're going for.
It does, and I don't know how to do it. I don't want government saying, "Hey, you can't say this, you can say that." Like, so it's in a weird area where I don't know how to do it, but I'd like to see something. But
okay,
I really think just we got to talk to each other, man. Like,
yeah, the human connection is probably It's probably. I mean, that's how we're able to do this. It's because except for you, Tim, you, sir. You must have been piping your pheromones through the microphone or something like that. But I mean, the reason why, the people who are most at odds here, the reason why we can do the show is because Chris and I connected in person long before we ended up getting into these vitriolic confrontations. I'm just kidding, not vitriolic, but like the personal connection with people you trust and benefit of the doubt, all these things. I think we have to work on it. Step one is being aware of the problem, I guess, right? So, then we can work our way from there. Okay. Unless anybody else has anything else, it's super late. We went super late. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. I had a good time.
It's one of my favorite ones. I like this one.
Yeah, me too. And
good night, guys.
yeah, good night, everybody.
Good night.